Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, welcome to the 324th episode spectacular.
Wow, I can't believe we hit such a milestone. 324.
It warms the cockles of my heart. It warms the subcockles of my heart. Obligation. That is what has brought us here today. Obligation. Dusty was fond of saying that this show would never truly die, because it's such a fun thing to do, and because the football season just keeps going. So here we are. Technically the numbering system gives us 300, but a number of our shows were listed as two-parters in the very first year of the show before we realized that was an incredibly stupid way of doing things. I'm not blaming Dusty, but I am saying it was his idea.
It's not his fault, but to his credit, he was responsible.
Exactly. So, as the person who's not on the show to defend himself, I will say that, yeah. It may have been his idea. It may have been mine. I don't remember the meeting. I just know that I was going to say there was no quid pro quo there, but I don't know if that ends up, assisting anybody at this point. So, welcome to this episode. We have some cool stuff to go over. We have some not so cool stuff to talk about, including the loss to the Chiefs. So we will be discussing that in just a moment. But before we do, just want to take a moment and thank you guys. Before I even go into the spiel about donations, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's really cool that we've been at this for 6 years, and we have such a rabid fan base, a group of people who wants to listen to this show twice a week during the regular season and does so in droves. Whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you do it, just really thank you guys so much. It's very nice to take a look at the listening numbers and be like, wow, we are a winning team, and I can tell because the numbers are going up. But just the fact that you guys have stuck around for so long, again, really do appreciate it. Thank you for sending out links to friends on social media, however you do it, or if you just do it in person. I know I have met a few listeners out at bars or even at my various places of employment who listen to the show, and it's just been really cool to run into you guys and talk to you. So again, thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. Now let's get into a couple of people who have donated to the show. If you hear value in what we produce, you can help us out in one of two different ways. You can go to patreon.com/norsecode and donate there. That's more of a monthly subscription. We are currently running a promotion of $3.50 per month or more will get you free swag from Norse Code. I'm about to mail out the actual stuff. I know I've said that out for 2 weeks, but I've been waiting to get a couple of stragglers on addresses. So I'm just going to send it out because I have one straggler left. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code and donate to the show there. We do have 2 new Patreon subscribers to just quick mention. One is Mark Ward via Patreon. Again, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mark. William Hickson, however, has decided to go over $3.50 and go $3.53 because he loves us so much. I assume that's probably a decent reason. That, and we made such a big deal about $3.51 and $3.52. So if this is...
We may have goosed it a little bit.
We may have just, poked and prodded the bear enough. And, $3.53 is a perfectly cromulent way to assist our show and help keep the lights on and help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. Speaking of which, Nicholas has a donation in the way of PayPal, and he gives a message. What's up, guys? Love the podcast. As a Vikings fan all the way out in Syracuse, New York, it can be hard at times to get my Vikings fix, but you guys make it easier. I figure if $3.50 is enough to keep Nessie at bay, $10 should be enough for a full-blown ambush. Flanker from the sides, fight hard and don't quit. Maybe even blow the Galler horn first, because that just gives me goosebumps. Also, question for Arif. What does Kirk have to do to justify what we paid him? Keep in mind, this was sent before the Kansas City game, before the next couple sentences. If he continues at his current rate, we have a decent shot at winning the Super Bowl this year. But if we don't win at all, will it really matter that Kirk played out of his mind for a lot of the regular season? We paid him $84 million because we're in a, quote, win now mode. So it feels like if it doesn't get us the ring this year or next, regardless of how he plays, we're either going to let him walk or maybe keep him around if he's willing to take a pay cut. Just curious how you feel about it, and if you see any college quarterbacks you would like to have us try and go after. Again, thanks for the great content, and Skol Vikes.
Yeah, just to get that out of the way really quickly. I don't really like to think about contracts evaluated by team wins. I know quarterbacks drive team wins more than any other position, but there's so much at play here. I think the Kansas City game is a really good example of that, actually. So I wouldn't say, hey, let's evaluate, Cousins by whether or not the Vikings, win the Super Bowl, because let's say, the Vikings make it to the wild card round or something like that, and they lose because of 4 kickoff returns or something, right? And the Vikings still put up 26 points in 8 drives or something, right? Obviously, that wouldn't be Kirk Cousins' fault at all, right? And you wouldn't say, well, he withered in the playoffs, because he played well. You would, probably correctly attribute that to the special teams failing him. And so I just feel like the way we should take a look at it is if he puts up top 10 quarterback play, which is not the same as top 10 quarterback numbers. He doesn't have to rank, top 10 in, PFF grade or QBR or passer rating or whatever, although that is probably, PFF is probably the closest to what we'd be looking for, but we'd want him to be able to, manage games when they're winning, win games when they're losing, and so on. So, a top 10 quarterback in theory is the kind of quarterback that has the ability to put you in a position to win when you're down by 6 points with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Now, not every quarterback or no quarterback can get you to win every single one of those situations. So if it occurs in a playoff game and he just doesn't get it done, that's not proof positive, right? That he's not the kind of quarterback who can, but he needs to prove that he has the ability to do that, which incidentally, he hasn't done that yet. He also needs to be the type of quarterback that can consistently put points off the board, points up on the board. He did that for the last month. He didn't do that against Kansas City to an enormous degree. And so, that kind of remains an open question. So justify his contract. I think a lot of it just has to do with kind of putting him in that top 10 range. I don't think he has to be the top quarterback. He's not even being paid like the top quarterback. And, he wouldn't have gotten paid the same as someone like Aaron Rodgers hitting the open market. So I don't think we should evaluate the contract like that. And therefore, I don't think we should evaluate the contract by a Super Bowl win, right? So it just really isn't the same thing. That said, I think this is kind of a constant question on our mind. We'll be consistently reevaluating that contract as we go forward. Right now, I would say his play thus far in the season has justified the contract, but we'll kind of see because there have been some worrisome signs over the past over this game and the game against the Bears and the Packers.
All right, so now that we have all that kind of taken care of, let's get into the meat of the episode. And the first thing that I want to mention before we actually start the review of the Chiefs game is Adam Thielen and his hamstring.
So he re-aggravated his hamstring, I think on basically the second play of the game. I think reports are indicating that he's not likely to play against Dallas. You've got a bye week after that, I think. And so you might as well just play it safe until then. So that sucks. Thielen thought he was healthy enough to play almost immediately after he injured that hamstring. Obviously, they decided to wait it out against Washington. They didn't need him, it turns out, for that game. And that gave him another 10 days of rest that he otherwise would not have had. Turns out, that's not enough. And so they're going to be a lot more cautious going forward. It didn't seem to get worse. The evidence that, reporters have, reported on have told us that it's not worse. It just hasn't gotten enough better, as it were.
Yeah. And actually, the way the schedule works out is the Sunday night game is against the Cowboys, and then the Broncos come to Minnesota on the 17th. So there's technically 2 more games until the bye.
The bye week after that.
Yes.
Got it.
All right, so we have that, which leads us into the game against the Chiefs, which was not pretty, which seems to be a theme at least the last 2 weeks. But this was a game where Kirk Cousins never looked comfortable. This was a game that featured some very questionable choices by the offensive coordinator and a lot of odd defensive play. The term that the broadcasters were using was cute. People were trying to be too cute with their play selection. And if we're doing that, I still think this was an incredibly ugly game.
Yeah. So there's a lot to kind of unpack here. So what I ultimately concluded in the Athletic piece was that this isn't really like the Bears game where I said, hey, if everybody else had played better but Cousins, the Vikings still would have lost, which, kind of places it almost squarely on Cousins. He needed to play better for the Vikings to win. Now, this is a close game. So 800 different things could have happened and the Vikings would have either forced it into overtime or won. So you can't even reasonably say that, if everyone else had played better except for Cousins, they would have lost because they definitely would have won, right? Cousins played a game where he wasn't really bad, but he certainly wasn't good. And so if this is the kind of game he has over a 16-game season, this is an example of him not living up to his contract. So if he continues to have this kind of game, that's a problem. And it's not because he completed under 60% of his passes or anything like that. That's complicated with a couple of drops, a couple of throwaways, one hit as he was thrown. And it's not because of the raw statistics like 5.8 yards per attempt. Remember, he also has 3 touchdowns. That's pretty nice. And I think all of those touchdowns, those are actually pretty good. So you can't even take that away from him. It wasn't like they were all kind of yards after catch type touchdowns. He produced in the red zone, which is something that, he didn't do last week. So that was good to see. It was just more kind of everything together. So you mentioned that he was under pressure a lot. That's true. He was under pressure on 42.5% of his dropbacks. That's above what I consider to be, and this is an idea I took from Sam Monson, who, says it pretty consistently on the PFF podcast, above 40%, and the offense is essentially a no-go. Now, we're seeing some quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson invite a little bit of extra pressure, put extra, pressure, I guess, on the offensive lineman to produce and making it more difficult for the offensive line, but, producing more by taking a little of extra time in the pocket. And so he has a high sack rate, he has a high pressure rate, but some of it's induced by him and he pays it back by being, pretty remarkable under pressure. So it's not a 100% truism. For Cousins, it certainly is. Since the Vikings are 1-3 in games where they've allowed a 40% pressure rate or higher, and they've won every game where they've allowed lower than a 40% pressure rate. They're undefeated in that scenario. Some of that is on the offensive coordinator. Some of that's on the offensive line. Some of that is on Cousins. In this game, I think very little of it is on Cousins. A lot of the pressure has to do with Chris Jones and Derek Nottie, the interior defensive line, beating up on the interior offensive line. I thought Riley Reif actually played really well. I thought Brian O'Neill, he didn't play great. He played kind of poorly, but certainly not as poorly as Garrett Bradbury and Pat Elflein, and to some extent Josh Klein, although his issues were more penalty related. So a lot of interior pressure. The issue is that generally speaking, for most quarterbacks, exterior pressure is more difficult to deal with than interior pressure, despite our perceptions. Interior pressure comes faster, it's harder to escape from, and so on. Well, that's actually not true. You actually do have the ability to escape from interior pressure. It's easier to sidestep interior pressure and so on. For Cousins specifically, I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't the case, because in some of these throws, so for example, there's a throw I broke down at The Athletic. It's actually the exact same play as Buffalo right 7 heaven. Down to the formation, you've got a bunch with the F in front of the bunch. You've got a running back offset to one side. You've got a single back receiver on the other side. The single receiver is running a 7 route. The other receivers are running 2 outs, an intermediate route, a short route, and a deep 7. So it's the exact same play. And so it's very easy for me to take a look at it, break it down, and read it. And he misses Diggs deep. And by that, I mean he takes a short shot. Diggs is definitely open deep. They've got a conflict on Juan Thornhill, the safety. And basically whoever the safety chooses to defend, you throw it to the other guy. The problem is that there is interior pressure on this play. Now, a lot of good quarterbacks, I say a lot of good quarterbacks as if there are a lot, but good quarterbacks will generally sidestep this pressure and be able to step up into the throw. In this case, he doesn't do it. He avoids the pressure by getting rid of the ball quickly. And so which is a pressure management strategy, but it means that the Vikings, didn't get the conversion. They didn't get the big play, and that big play would have been really great to have. And so this is an issue against interior pressure. He's not sidestepping any of that pressure. He's not engaging in other types of pocket management. He essentially has two types of pocket management: get rid of the ball quickly, which is fine, or scramble and escape the pocket, which is also fine. If you can throw on the run, and sometimes he can, sometimes he can't. So in this case, it meant that, he gave up a huge play that was there. And this actually was the play that Stephon Diggs and Kirk Cousins ended up going to the sidelines and kind of discussing calmly over the tablet, which is a nice change from the Chicago Bears game. So that's just an example of his issues dealing with interior pressure, his issues with pressure. So he played poorly under pressure, more poorly under pressure than you would have hoped or expected. And so as a result, they lost a lot of opportunities. They made some mistakes. They had to punt instead of, kick field goals, or kick field goals instead of score touchdowns. So that's an issue, and you could say that that's his fault, right? The pressure, in this case, not his fault. He didn't create the pressure. The Kansas City defensive line and the Vikings offensive line are at fault here. In fact, I don't think there's a single pressure that he's under fault for, but he didn't manage the pressure once it arrived. And that's kind of the secondary part of pressure on an offense, is that the quarterback also has to manage it. And he did a very poor job of that. So you can say that. And that kind of deals with kind of two parts of it. I thought Dalvin Cook played really well. The problem is he had 72 yards after contact. He had 71 total yards. That tells you, I think, a lot. Every time he had any yards before contact, it seemed like on the very next play, the offensive line would give up yards behind the line of scrimmage. They would give up defenders, and he'd be contacted behind the line, and he'd have to fight through that. So he played, I think, pretty well. Obviously, he had a drop. I think PFF didn't count it as a drop because it was just – and this is another thing. Cousins was suffered from 3 drops in the game, and I believe all of them were also inaccurate, so he made it much more difficult for his receivers. And I believe that he probably only would have had – well, I don't think any of them would have been dropped according to PFF. I think the Dalvin Cook one might still be dropped. I don't know. But generally speaking, I'd say he'd probably only have 1 drop if he was accurate on those throws instead of 3. Again, PFF only logs 2. I don't think they count that Dalvin Cook one. So generally speaking, I'd say Cook had a pretty good game, but, the offensive line didn't, block properly for him. And so he didn't get opportunities there. Diggs, he ends up with, I think, 1 reception for not that much. He also
4 yards.
4 yards. He also drew holding, not pass interference, which is unfortunate. So it was only 5 yards, but automatic first down, which those shouldn't exist, but fine. Vikings move. And he just didn't get that much. He had another target deep downfield. It was pretty inaccurate. I wouldn't characterize that as a drop. It hit his fingers. PFF doesn't count it as a drop either, because I don't think it's a catchable ball, and Diggs is laying out for it. And it just would not be fair to penalize him for that. And we saw a lot of balls fly way over the heads of receivers. We saw that on the Irv Smith drop. We saw that on a Dalvin Cook out route. We saw that with the Diggs throw. We saw that with Laquan Treadwell. And initially, that happened early in the game. Kirk's coming off of a 4-game streak of being pretty phenomenal. And my initial thought is that's probably on Treadwell. He's just not fast enough. I rewatch it, and I don't think that's the case. I think that's just inaccurate. And he's throwing without a base. He's not stepping up into the throw. Again, there's pressure in the pocket. So that's an explanation of why that would be the case. But he doesn't make up for that pressure with either arm talent or pocket management to be able to get the ball in the right spot. So a lot of overthrows in the game. He mentioned this after the game, that it's because, in one case, like the Dalvin Cook one, he doesn't get his hips turned around because he thought he could just make it. And sometimes, he has to make a decision where he doesn't have time to get his hips turned around or set his feet, and he just has to throw it. Which that's true. That happens to every quarterback. And other times, he thinks he can do it and he just doesn't. And he needs to be more methodical because he does in fact have that time. So, a lot of issues with Cousins, who again had a bunch of good throws, threw 3 touchdowns, but just wasn't good. And if he had been good, the Vikings would have won. That said, the Vikings don't allow a 91-yard touchdown, right? If they don't shank a punt. Well, if they don't shake a punt, that probably forces overtime. But still, they don't shake a punt. All of the things that happen defensively, or if the running game gets off the ground, right? All of these other things, they probably would have won. And so it is unfair to put it all on Cousins. The piece I wrote at The Athletic is really about Cousins, in part because that's kind of the discussion that I was having with the beat writers after the game, and I kind of wanted to get it all out there. In part because that's kind of what people want to talk about, but it isn't really just on Cousins. So there's a discussion to be had about where was Daniil Hunter in this game? It didn't seem like Everson Griffin, by the way, had a really good game, but this seemed like the first game that Hunter really slowed down a little bit. We didn't get to see, and he had a sack, but other than that, I don't know that he logged that much pressure. And so, edge defenders are not going to show up every single game or anything like that, and he has, except for this game. And so you can't be like, well, what the hell, man? But it would have been nice to see kind of more pressure. We ended up seeing a lot more from Stephen Weatherly at the end of the game, Afadi Odenigbo at the end of the game. Got a piece coming up about that. Odenigbo's been playing really well. But yeah, there wasn't a ton coming from the defensive line. They misfit on their run assignments for that 91-yard touchdown. Harrison Smith misses a tackle, and that one I'm not as inclined to put too much blame on Harrison Smith, because I think a lot of that has to do with the run fit. Daniil is lined up way out wide. That creates this large lane. Harrison Smith has to defend all of it. He's a little bit on the outside version of that lane. Hunter's not squeezing the gap, and so Damian Williams can kind of just choose where he wants to attack that gap. He attacks the very inside, so Harrison has to attack as far as he can. Doesn't get there, misses the tackle. Then Anthony Harris has a free shot, and he just whiffs. So that's a pretty bad tackle attempt from him. Mistake there. That's the game, right? The missed extra point from Dan Bailey. It's difficult to say that's the game, but it changes the play calling in the red zone for the final two drives for the Chiefs, and that change in play calling very well could have altered things in favor of the Vikings. So. You might say that's the game, you might not, but it kind of creates a different situation that has this butterfly effect that it probably is more favorable than not for the Vikings. And so, you have to consider that. Trey Waynes got burned for 111 yards by Tyreek Hill, 140 yards overall.
Yeah, all of a sudden he turns into the second coming of Alshon Jeffrey against the Vikings. There is no covering him at all.
Where Trey Waynes is Josh Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was, and let's be clear, that touchdown was amazing. That was
incredible.
That was an incredible play.
One of the better catches I've seen all season.
Yeah, that was an incredible play. I'm not entirely sure how you defend that. The way that he ended up catching it and making it into the end zone. That said, he got burned for a lot.
Right, because it's 111 yards. You say, hey, that 40-yard touchdown, that happens, man. I can't, just like the Marvin Jones touchdown against Xavier Rhodes, the second one anyway. That happens. Can't do anything about it, which is fine. You don't have to ding Waynes for that one. And I think it was either that one. Yeah, I think it's that one. It's covered too, so he should have safety help on top, and he didn't get it. That one's on Harrison Smith. So I don't put too much blame for Harrison Smith on the 91-yard touchdown. I do want to say, hey, Harry's out of alignment there. The other 40-yard touchdown's a contested catch. Initially, I thought that was on Anthony Harris, but I think that's actually cover 4. You can see that based on their landmarks. The safeties are not on top of the numbers. They're between the numbers and the hashes. It's difficult to tell the difference between cover 2 and cover 4 when both routes on either side of the field are vertical, because it just – cover 2 looks like a cover 4 where the safeties are out of position. Or cover 4 looks like cover 2 where the safeties are out of position. So this one I'm pretty confident is cover 4 based off of the safety landmark, so it's not really on Anthony Harris. And so basically it's just man-to-man. Trey Waynes has a contested catch against Tyreek Hill. And there's a couple of issues here. The first is that as soon as Hill turns back to look for the ball, Waynes, who is in phase against the fastest player in the NFL, so already, he should just that's great news, right? That's great. He doesn't slip under to try and contest the ball. He doesn't try to undercut the route or anything like that. That's a problem because, again, there's a difference between getting your head turned around to look back for the ball. When you're out of phase, you should not be doing that. You'll no longer be able to make a play on the ball because you'll slow down. you should be attacking the hands. But when you're in phase, that's when you should start turning your head around along with the receiver to attack the ball. He doesn't do that. Second, Hill, who is out of position, establishes position after tracking the ball, figuring out where it's going to be, puts himself in the right spot. Waynes is now behind him. That gives him essentially an 80-20 shot to win. The thing is, the other 20%, that is largely on the DB when it's not a drop. And so Waynes then doesn't have the ability to contest the catch as it's arriving, doesn't knock it out of his hands or anything like that. So a lot of phases of that catch, Waynes could have done better and he didn't. So that's a problem. He gets burned on a double move. That's a problem. And that happened, I think, earlier in the game than that one. He gives up a curl route for a first down. I don't know how much I blame him for that. That's kind of like the Xavier Rhodes thing. You got to stay on top, try not to get him go deep. And I think that curl route, it still got a first down, so it's good on its own, ends up setting up that double move later because he did drop back on that curl to catch the ball. Waynes bites on that. Boom, goes deep, and Waynes gets burned. So, and that is also cover 4. So I wouldn't blame Anthony Harris for that one either. Harris had a bad game, but those I don't think are examples of it. Any one of those, Waynes plays better, except for, that deep 40-yard amazing touchdown. Any one of those, Waynes plays better, and then you're in a position to win, right? Xavier Rhodes had a fine game. He didn't get targeted all that often. Harrison Smith, against the run, just generally Harrison Smith against the run was pretty poor, pretty great in coverage. He played the role of a cover 2 safety. He was on top. And I think he knocked the ball out of Tyreek's hands in the first quarter. So, good on him. Generally good in coverage, poor against the run. Anthony Harris, poor in both respects. Not good to see. Mac Alexander lines up against Travis Kelce. That's a result of a series of rules that the Chiefs had figured out and exploited. It's not a problem inherent with the scheme. It's just, you go down the list of, these coverage rules, they motion, and that motion puts Kelce on the outside, because you've got some players shadowing some players, because you've got some players in zone and some players in man. Just the rules of that coverage ended up putting Alexander on Kelce, and they exploited it. It's kind of like how the Vikings defense was very good, but then the Rams figured out how to get a wide receiver lined up against Anthony Barr. And it's like, wow, this covers 98% of situations, and they found the other 2%. It's kind of the same thing here, where they had, 98% of situations covered, and then the Chiefs figured out kind of what that other 2% was, put Kelce on Alexander. That's in the first down. And that's a mismatch. Alexander, obviously, he didn't win the rep or anything like that, but it's difficult to blame Alexander for that. So tons of things. Kendricks had an okay game. Barr had an okay game, got a ton of pressure. Another example where Moore flings it right through Barr's outstretched hands, maybe a foot away, and not only, gets it through his hands and doesn't get the pass deflection or, the hit or the sack or anything like that, but it's a completed pass. So that's pretty incredible. Matt Moore fumbles twice, recovered by the Chiefs both times. So it would have been nice to recover one of those fumbles, right? That probably changes the tenor of the game pretty significantly. The Vikings probably win in that scenario. So, by the way, I got a ton of questions about this. When I think it was Damian Williams picked up that second fumble and the refs whistled it dead, some people said Mike Zimmer called a timeout. That's not true. You can't call a timeout in the middle of a play and have it be called. That's not what happened. It's the holy roller rule. Game in 1978 when the Raiders played the Chargers, the Raiders intentionally fumbled the ball and batted it forward along the ground. So they intentionally fumble it, and they bat the ball all along the ground. And I believe it was Dave Casper recovers it in the end zone. They get awarded a touchdown. It happened in the final minutes. This happened early in the 1978 season, but as a result of that game, / if that game had gone the other way, the Chargers would have made the playoffs that year. And so people get mad about this trickery. I don't care. I think it's kind of funny. And they make a rule about it where if an offensive player fumbles, his teammate, so he can, but his teammate cannot advance the ball from the spot of the fumble. So they blow the play dead because of that rule in the final 2 minutes of a half. Can't do anything about it. Nobody can advance the ball unless it's the fumbling person who recovers it. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. That was kind of confusing for some people.
The first time I ran into that on Madden, I was incredibly confused. Like, what the hell is this about? Oh, that makes complete sense.
Right, yeah. It's meant to stop a weird trick play, which no need. That's funny.
And that was just Al Davis trying to exploit the rules. That's all.
Yeah. More of that, please.
Can we? Well, I mean,
well, it's a little late now. But.
Well, I mean, we need like a Ouija board or something to be able to pull that off, but that's kind of beside the point. I would like to. Wow. I like saying this, and I believe one of my fantasy team names is still the Ghost of Al Davis. So we'll. Just point that out in a sec. I don't do this often, but I did want to lead. I wanted to open with the list of receivers that had more yards than Diggs this particular game. We're going to start with Amir Abdullah, Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr., our man C.J. Ham, Dalvin Cook, and stud wide receiver Laquan Treadwell, who had 3 receptions for 58 yards. Easily the best game of his career.
Turns out. The only other game I can remember is the Green Bay game where he was having a good game until he had a really remarkably bad game. Cost an interception.
Yeah. Treadwell, the last 2 weeks, has had a fair amount of production here. At the same time, the Dachshund is able to be kind of activated off of IR. So we did get a question about this in the mailbag, I believe. Is Treadwell now the de facto wide receiver 3?
No, I think it's still BC Johnson. Even if like Dachshund comes back, I think BC Johnson has proven that he can consistently produce. Apparently, Vikings wide receiver group / the coaching staff are really impressed with his approach since he's come back, which is like great. But like BC Johnson has just been very reliable and he's been getting open. He has figured out all of his assignments. I think you should reward that. And I think he's just a better player.
So you mentioned the interior line play as a good cause for all the problems that the Cousins was having, at least trying to step into throws. How was the outside looking?
I think generally all right. So I think Brian O'Neill, he escaped last week from giving up the first sack of his season because it ended up getting credited to somebody else. I think to Josh Klein. I'm not sure I agree with that from PFF's perspective, but that's what ended up happening there. I'm sure if I looked at, like Sport Radar or Sports Information Solutions or some other tracking company, they would have assigned it to both or just to O'Neill. But he still hasn't given up a sack in his career per PFF. Another game where that happens, he ends up, quote unquote, giving up a sack, but it actually ends up that Elfline's player caused the sack first. He would have given up a sack, except Elfline himself essentially caused the sack by getting backed into Kirk Cousins. So I think the streak is still alive for him, which I think is kind of funny. So he didn't play as well as he has over the past couple of weeks. That's going to happen from time to time. Riley Reif, I thought, played really well. O'Neill, just, kind of all right. Maybe Josh Klein, when you take away the penalties, played really well, but the penalties happened. They brought the Vikings back, and the Vikings just weren't penalized that much in the game, and so those kind of stick out some more. But Elfline and Bradbury just had awful games. Elfline in particular was bad against the run. And, I thought, obviously aside from the sack, he was still poor in pass protection too. So, just rough. The outside, I thought played all right. I thought Riley Reif was, surprisingly adept, especially compared to everybody else in the run game. O'Neill was fine in the run game. It was good to see, but it just was overwhelmed by how much of a problem the interior offensive line was.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly not ideal, and definitely not the way that, definitely not the way they've been playing the last couple of weeks, too.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Bradbury play really well the past couple of weeks. Klein has been a little bit up and down since his injury, so, who knows. But, even Elfline played a little bit better in the past couple of weeks, and to see it kind of bounce back like that, it makes you wonder, how much of that is genuine improvement, how much of that is, just kind of variance, how much of that is opponent dependent or sensitive or anything like that. So we don't know. But, I think the concerns about Bradbury and Elfline for sure, the concerns about Elfline are reopened. The concerns about Bradbury, I would say maybe put a little bit on hold. I remember I said a couple of weeks ago, if Bradbury plays poor throughout the season or after, these 4 games, and it turns out he regresses, are you worried about him? And long term, not really. But in terms of can he be reliable in like the wild card round of the playoffs? I don't know, because he hasn't demonstrated that he can string together 4 games in a row of really high level play. It'll be kind of interesting to see kind of where Bradbury kind of really lies, or whether or not, just from game to game, he'll be kind of a surprise, maybe based on the opponent or kind of just how he's feeling that day, whether or not he's in the zone or not.
So the big question I feel that needs to be asked after this game is what happened with the offensive play calling. This is ignoring the fact that Cousins never really looked like he was comfortable. There were some play calls here that were truly fascinating to watch, and not in a good way.
The play calling, so part of the problem is that the Vikings were in 3rd and long a lot. And so you end up in a where you're like throwing the ball a lot. You don't get to do a lot of play action. And so that you kind of have to take that into account. But even then, it just seemed like it just wasn't there. There was a lot of running on 2nd and long that just wasn't very successful. The screen passes got blown up. Still, I would have liked to see more screen passes. The problem is the Chiefs, they blitzed the last 2 games a lot. They didn't blitz this much in this game. And so the screens are designed to attack those. You don't get access to those as much if they have the ability to play kind of more sound assignment football. But I don't know if the play calling is as much a concern to me as Cousins' ability to execute those plays, because, those play action, rollouts, he dumps it short. You're like, well, what was that? It turns out that there was a deeper option that he declined. So it very much seemed like Zimmer, who at halftime said he didn't like the balance of the offense, which typically refers to run-pass balance. It seemed like Zimmer kind of put pressure to force more runs in the second half. And so I would say the fact that they ran more than they should have. And I remember I tweeted out at the end of the first half that, hey, it makes sense that the Vikings were running the ball here. And a bunch of people were like, Arif, what are you talking about? And I was fine with them running the ball in that scenario because Cousins was pretty shaky at that point in the game and just wasn't getting a lot done, was throwing some dangerous throws. And, I was kind of worried that there would be a higher chance of a turnover than normal. Because even though, bad passing is usually better than good running, I think here in the red zone, it kind of made more sense. But as the game went on, you just kind of had to throw that out of the window. The Vikings were not even getting close to cracking off a big run, much less actually cracking off a big run. And so, Zimmer likes, these runs because he thinks there's not really a lot of evidence to support this, that you get, a 3-yarder here, a 2-yarder here, a loss for 1 here, a 4-yarder here, and you'll get, to 12, 20, 16, maybe an 80 later. But there's not a lot of evidence to indicate that that's the case. And so in some games when that happens, it kind of confirms his belief. And in other games when it doesn't happen, he thinks probably they should have run more to set that up to make that happen. And so it's difficult to disprove, because you can always say, well, they should have run the ball more to create that situation. And I didn't like the increased number of runs, but I just don't put that on Stefanski. I think a lot of that's on Zimmer. There were times where Cousins is throwing short of the sticks on 3rd down, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? This doesn't make any sense. Look at the all-22, and there are just options there past the sticks. And so I don't have as much of a gripe with the play calling as I did kind of in the immediate aftermath of the game. And the gripes I do have are really just more about what I perceive to be the pressure that Zimmer probably put on Stefanski to call more runs and stuff like that. Because of the screens, I understand. Like, yeah, he had that negative 7-yarder from Irv Smith. They were in man coverage. They didn't send any extra blitzers, so that got blown up. Would have been nice if Irv Smith had dropped that one. Also, it just him just dashing back, I don't know if that's part of the play design or not, but that created a bad opportunity, and now you're second 17. I think they ran it after that. Not great. And so now you're in a weird third and long scenario that's like very difficult to convert, and of course Cousins doesn't. So yeah, the play calling is not great. I don't know how much I put on Stefanski and how much I put on Cousins and how much I put on Zimmer.
Well, we can also talk about Zimmer and play calling, because the defensive play calling was questionable as well, especially in the for the last 2 drives.
Yeah, that one is like, it clearly wasn't good because it wasn't successful. But I say, hey, I don't like this play calling, and then I think, well, what would I have liked? What's the call here? Because the problem is, and this is actually, I highlighted this before the game in my Chiefs preview. What happens, in this scenario? Well, they're fast. You want cover 2. That way you can get brackets on Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman. But cover 2 is pretty easy to beat. You run your smash concepts. You run your tight end up the seam. They've got a pretty good tight end. Tampa 2 is supposed to be a solution to that, but you still do have access to the cover 2 beaters. And you get these crossing routes underneath that Matt Moore in particular just loves to take, these no cover zones, which is what they were doing at the beginning of the game anyway. Well, then, maybe the answer to that is cover 4. You take away the seams. You have the ability to cover kind of these larger zones underneath. And then, you end up manning up against Tyreek Hill and you get beaten there. Is it cover 6? Who are you bracketing in cover 6? What's the seam there? What are you doing if you're blitzing? Is it man blitz? Is it zone blitz? Kind of what are your answers there? And while it would have been nice probably to see some more blitzes, because Matt Moore was just not particularly great against blitzes until that final play, to get, them in field goal range for a 44-yarder to Tyreek Hill. I just it seemed like really the issue was more in the first half than the second half, because the second half, it was just, I think the right plays were called, but the ball just bounced the wrong way. I mean, you force 2 fumbles. They got 4 sacks in the fourth quarter. I don't know how much I hate the play calling there. That throw to Tyreek Hill, they had a ton of pressure. I mean, Barr was maybe a foot away. Weatherly was not too far away. And he just gets rid of the ball really quickly, and Hill has the ability to collapse and tackle. Actually, the first half play calling would have been nice if they were more aggressive in terms of sending blitzers and stuff like that, because I think that's probably your best solution to the speed that the Chiefs receiving core has, is to speed up Matt Moore's clock and just be comfortable kind of taking it on underneath. So as it was, that second half, in terms of, especially in the final 2 drives, the play calling, I get it, because there are just moments where it's just like, this actually kind of was successful. Plus, they stripped the ball. They just didn't get it. And so, yeah, they allow 2 field goals, but is it really the fault of the play calling? I don't know. I think it's the fault of maybe bad luck. I probably have to watch those 2 drives again to see kind of, because I know a lot of people are upset with the play calling. And so me saying I'm not that upset with it is kind of going against the grain. So I'll have to double check to see kind of what people are saying about the play calling. I'll have to double check to see what happened in those last 2 drives to see if I'm kind of off base here. But my impressions based off of, my initial watch and my cursory rewatch are not so much the play calling, but more, stuff happens.
Well, let's wrap this one up. Are there any parting shots on this particular game that we should talk about? Anything that we missed other than the brilliance of CJ Ham?
Yeah, CJ Ham in space is just unstoppable, huh?
Ham in space.
Just a Ham in space. That's an old reference.
Terrible.
I'm curious how Zoomer my podcast audience is. Who's going to get that? Who's not? That's actually probably old for my generation too. That's just an old reference.
Yeah, all the boomers listening got that, and some of the older, not Generation Z, because we hate that. The Oregon Trail generation, I think, is something that was called. They'll
between
get that.
Gen X and Millennials / also Gen X and Millennials.
Yeah, there's like a 5-year gap. We remember Oregon Trail. We played it in school. We get that reference. Captain America style.
Parting shots. Yeah, just don't get too caught up in a specific part of the game to blame. A lot of things went wrong by a little bit, and that's how they lost.
And you can tell it was that sort of game because every podcast seems to be labeled or named like, what went wrong or who's to blame or something like that. It's like, we're still in decent shape right now. Admittedly, I was so upset after the game I went to the gym, and I haven't done that in a while. But still, like, it's not not the worst loss we've ever had in the regular season, to be sure. Before we're done, tell me about the food in Kansas City.
Oh my God.
I assumed you died. I assumed you OD'd on barbecue sauce sometime on Saturday night.
I too assumed that.
When
I woke up the next morning, I was, yeah, there you go. You got it. Pleasantly surprised. I don't know. I still had to go to the game and work. Phenomenal. So the thing is, when we talk about like, hey, Chicago is a great food city, New York is a great food city, London's a great food city. A lot of times we're not just talking about the quality of food, we're talking about kind of the diversity of the cuisine they have to offer. So Minneapolis, obviously, they've got, Hmong, they've got a burgeoning Ethiopian and Somalian food scene. They've got, obviously, Scandinavian food, and they've got a couple of like French restaurants. They've got good food. Chicago has a wider variety of those kinds of cuisines than New York and London are international cities. So they've got all kinds of really high quality food. London, thankfully, has fixed the problem that they've had with food in the past. So that's what we're kind of talking about when we're talking about great food cities. But like Kansas City is more like San Diego in terms of being a good food city, in that it does like one thing just phenomenally well. And the barbecue in Kansas City is extraordinary. I've had barbecue in a lot of places in the South. And while I would imagine, that whole hog barbecue, that's like, you're going to kill it in the Carolinas. It's probably not going to be as good anywhere else. Kansas City just really, it's at this intersection of, because Texas does a bunch of beef. Carolinas, they do a lot of pork. And then Kansas City, they love pork ribs. They love beef ribs. But I think the thing that they're probably, I don't know if known for, but they specialize in are burnt ends. And I love burnt ends. They're like meat candy, man. They're so good. And I had so much of it, and I died because it was so good. And the thing is, I think with a lot of foods, you eat so much of it, you're like, I can't eat anymore. And maybe I was getting close to that, but it was easy to eat a lot of it because they don't need to drape it in barbecue sauce. And, the best versions of Texas barbecue, the best version of Carolina barbecue, you don't need to drape it in that sauce either. So I'm not saying that that's like a distinction, but the good food that I had was not because of the sauce, although the sauce did add to it. That's the whole point. It's that you don't get the like sugary, sickly feeling that you get from a lot of barbecue sauces, especially, mass-produced barbecue sauce, where if you end up having a lot of barbecue with a lot of barbecue sauce, or if you end up having a lot of grilled food with a lot of barbecue sauce, which happens a lot, especially up north, you end up getting kind of sick of the taste of barbecue sauce, which is very sugary sometimes. And so it's very easy to just kind of want to stop eating that kind of food. Here it was just very beefy. And so I could just keep eating it. It was incredible. And if I mischaracterized Kansas City food, maybe there's a diversity of food there that I did not explore and I don't know enough about, please tell me, because next time I go to Kansas City, which hopefully is not in 8 years, hopefully I'll find another reason to go down there. I would love to explore that side of it. But, I went to a bunch of barbecue joints and I loved it.
I'm curious what your cholesterol, you should have done a baseline between the two before you left. And then when you came back, Jesse's like, why are you moving in slow motion?
My family is gifted, blessed with low cholesterol despite our meat intakes. I mean, Urshad eats more meat than me. That's my brother. And his cholesterol is crazy low.
So let's get to the mailbag. And the first question is an interesting question. It's from Eli, who asks, Do kickers actually miss less against the Vikings, or is that just a fan perception?
You're not going to believe this precisely because you're going to believe this. Yes, actually.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they do in fact make way more kicks against the Vikings. Maybe not way more kicks against the Vikings than anyone else. So I made this claim on the Straight Cash podcast with me and Chad Graff at The Athletic. Half the episodes you can get on the RSS feed, but if you want every episode, you need to subscribe to The Athletic. Plug. But in the post-game show, I said the Vikings are the subject over the last couple of years to the highest field goal percentage against than any other team in the league. And so if you feel like kickers are better against the Vikings for whatever reason than they are against other teams where the Vikings are themselves able to kick, then you're right. You're vindicated in this strange, random thing of luck. And so I was like, that's just such a strange statistic. I don't know if I believe it because that just feels too perfect. So before the show, and I saw this question come in a couple of different versions, plus people have asked me kind of independently of the show. I just decided to look at it myself. So I looked at opposition field goal percentage from 2015 to 2019 because that's when I thought I saw the statistic, 2015, 2019. So that's what I looked at. Maybe it's an arbitrary endpoint. Maybe whoever pointed me toward that statistic looked at 2015, 2019 because they thought that would be most advantageous for them to be able to look at. But I think I heard the statistic last year. So even so, including 2019 maybe helps. But the highest field goal percentage against does in fact belong to the Vikings. It's crazy. How? I don't know. And here's the thing, like, it's not by any amount, right? It's by the barest. It's 89.9% against Minnesota, 89.8% against Chicago, 88.7, and then a full percentage point to Arizona. So it's the most against Minnesota, then against Chicago, which is hilarious given that they're the two teams that have had the biggest struggles at kicker besides like maybe Pittsburgh. And I guess the Chargers, if you include the fact that they keep on losing them. But I was like,
they're
well, is there
like
a pattern?
Spinal Tap drummers at that point for them.
Right. I was like, is there a pattern? Like Minnesota's indoors. Is it just because Minnesota's indoors plus they've just had, really poor kickers? But Chicago is outdoors. Plus, they play the final half of the season in the winter. Arizona's indoors, but Cincinnati, which is fourth, is outdoors. Well, let's take a look at the bottom of the list. Miami, granted good climate, outdoors. Okay. They've benefited the most from opponent field goal percentage. Maybe it's because they're outdoors. But the next one's Detroit, indoors. New England, outdoors. Cleveland, outdoors. San Diego, great weather, outdoors. So, like, maybe there's a pattern. But if there is, it's actually fairly slight. And then I was like, well, is it all kicks? And it turns out if I take a look at extra points, oh, my God, they love making extra points against the Vikings. The average extra points percentage is 94%. Okay. Against the Vikings, it's 98.5%. Also, number one in the NFL. After that, it's Carolina, New York, and then Arizona again for some reason. So Arizona, Cincinnati, Minnesota keep on showing up at the top of this list. Chicago kind of just drops out their league average there. And maybe that's indicative. And then I was like, well, extra points, they're all at a specific distance. I wonder if I could take a look at this by distance. And so I'm taking a look at it. Well, by 50-plus yard field goals, the Vikings are I think fifth. By 40 to 49-yard field goals, the Vikings are second. By 30 to 39-yard field goals, the Vikings are 10th. And I was like, well, so they're not number one in any of these categories. Are they number one overall? So then I was like, what's the expected field goal make percentage? And how many field goals over expected did these teams make? So I added that all up. And the Vikings, so the average obviously is 0. If you take a look at second place all the way to 31st place, it's a very small spread, 6 above or 6 below. That's just the field goal make, percentage above expected in field goals. The Dolphins somehow benefit at number 32. Opponents they've made 12 fewer field goals between 2015 and 2019 based off of rough distance and actual field goal make percentage. The Vikings are number one with 11 Opponents have made 11 more, twice that of second place. 11 more field goals than expected based off of distance against the Vikings. Plus, they're also number one in extra point percentage. That's insane. I don't know what else to do with this information.
I make an article?
I mean, I guess, but there's not much. I mean, I'll probably ask, and we've got, special teams coordinators giving their pressers on Thursday. I'll probably ask about that, but I don't know if there's anything to ask. Why is this the case?
I feel like that's the sort of thing that you bring up as a bye-week article. By the way, have you ever wondered or have you ever wondered to yourself, hey, the Vikings seem to sure have a lot of kicks against them. Oh, it turns out you're right.
Yeah, well, your biases are in fact true. A dangerous statement if I've ever heard one. Yeah, they make more. And then someone asked me, and I'm glad that, when I said it, that it did turn out to be true. But someone asked me, well, why is this the case? Is it because, they don't align correctly? Do they not block field goals correctly? And it's well, no, because how often do field goal blocks happen? Super rarely. When I play Madden, I play it on, I don't play it on All Pro or All Madden or whatever it is. I play on whatever wussy setting is not.
You're on Rookie. That's the setting, yes.
I'm on the second easiest, whatever that is.
Oh, okay.
But I block 2 field goals a game.
What an oddly
I make up for it by being terrible at throwing. So cool.
Okay, that's an oddly specific superpower to have. Whenever I play Madden, exactly. I can block 2 field goals per game.
Yeah, on whatever the second easiest setting is, I'm sure. Although if I could do that on a consistent basis, that would be just a hilarious superpower. But yeah, it's not like that. Yeah, I just I don't know, because you just don't block that many field goals, and you don't block that many extra points. And 8 of the Vikings games are indoor, of course, and so that clearly contributes. But there's a bunch of stadiums that are indoors, and they're not number one, right? And the stadiums that are outdoors have really nice weather, except for New England, right? And Detroit is at the bottom of these lists too. So why is it harder to kick in Ford Field? Why is it easy to kick both in I guess now it's just US Bank, but kind of felt like it was true in TCF, right? That was outdoors in bad conditions. So why is New England the only outdoor northern stadium that's near the bottom? Why is Chicago at the top of these lists? They get bad weather all the time. It's Chicago. It's the Windy City, which, I mean, fine. It's named after the politicians, but it's genuinely actually windy. I don't know. So yeah, I'll ask about this, but I don't know if they'll have an answer, especially, I mean, Marwan Malouf has been here a year. Maybe I can call up Prefer. I don't know.
Brian Jellerson asks, which is the anomaly? October Kirk or the return of Checkdown Kirk? Who's the real Kirk?
They're both the real Kirk. That's the problem. I think I don't know if I've said this on this podcast, but I've said it a couple of times on various podcasts and radio shows. He is very inconsistent from game to game, and they're very consistent in game. And the reason that's the case is because he is kind of a consistent quarterback, which I know sounds really weird, but this all goes all the way back to my post first season evaluation of Kirk Cousins, which is that he is a remarkably robotic and methodical quarterback that needs to get the ball out in rhythm on time. His pre-snap read needs to be correct. He's got pretty good arm strength, pretty good accuracy, and he will throw where the textbook says for him to throw. And unfortunately, the textbook does not cover every single situation. So you have to intuitively adjust the way that you throw based off of the situation. And so here, this is cool. So Kevin Cole, who's recently hired by PFF, great hire. He's been doing a bunch of interesting research. One of the things that he looked at, because, Aaron Rodgers has this really poor record in terms of comeback wins. And it's a difficult thing to think about because we remember that Hail Mary against Detroit, I think twice actually, Hail Mary against Detroit for a win. And a couple of other, I think he had maybe one against Chicago. Was it this season even? I don't know. But, he's had fourth quarter comebacks that are very memorable. But in terms of high level quarterbacks, his fourth quarter comeback percentage with a score or less, or any situation actually, is just awful compared to Tom Brady, Tony Romo, Phillip Rivers, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, etc. right? So, I mean, great group to be compared to. It's a nice asset to have, but he's pretty awful in those situations. So why is that the case? Well, he doesn't throw that many interceptions in those situations, whereas Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, etc., they all do. Well, that's weird. Why would you throw more interceptions and have a higher winning percentage? Well, it's because you need to be able to absorb that risk and be comfortable risking those throws, because you'll lose the games that you'll throw those interceptions in. But because you're the type of quarterback that throws balls that are risky, that can be intercepted in those situations, you're also putting your players in positions to win when they're not interceptions, and you'll be able to score. And that bears out. So Kevin Cole was like, well, is there another way to look at it? Because, you know, proxy statistics are typically what we have to use a lot in football, and they kind of suck. Because most of the time when you throw a lot of interceptions, it's because you're bad at football. Duh. And so is there a way we can look at this without looking at interceptions? And so he said, well, let's take a look at quarterback depth, which is a really good proxy for aggressiveness, depth downfield based off of win probability percentage. The lower your win probability percentage at that point in the game, the further downfield you should be throwing it. And there's other measures of like aggressiveness that you can take a look at, like how close a receiver is, or how close a defender is, or, you know, how far away from the sideline it is, etc. But, you know, this is a much, much better proxy. And Rodgers, awful. Like, he just does not take risks late in games. And that's why you lose late in games. So he'll put you in a position more often than not where your win probability is just going to be really high. So you don't really have to worry about this too much. But in the situations where you do have to worry about it, he's not really equipped as a quarterback, the way that he approaches the game, to mount comebacks on a consistent basis. Now, the person that's worse than this in the division is Kirk Cousins. Stafford's great at it. Trubisky's not a quarterback, so he doesn't count.
More of a running back, really.
Yeah, right. I mean, you know, just like Daniel Jones. I just really worry about their health, right? So you take a look at Kirk Cousins, and this is what I said at the end of the first season of Cousins, which was that he just makes the same throw based off of the coverage. And the problem is, late in games, the defense wants you to throw it short to the middle of the field because it'll take off clock. In a random situation, this is the correct throw. This receiver is open. It'll get you the first down. Boom. Right? It's an easy throw. It's not likely to be intercepted. This is the read that you make based off of the coverage that you see. But late in games, that reduces your win probability because it takes time off the clock. And then I asked Kevin, hey man, is this like actually the case? Because this is a thing that I've generated off a film study. But, you know, you can be affected by your bias, and you know, it's always good to back up subjective analysis with what seems to be at least relatively objective analysis to back that up. And it's the case. But the weird thing is, Rodgers, he's risk averse the entire game. Brady will ramp up his tolerance for risk, as will Manning, as will Brees, the further behind the team is in terms of win probability. Rodgers is the same. Cousins is the opposite. He's much more aggressive if the game is at a 50% win probability. He comes back to being conservative when you're ahead, which is great, because that's when you want to be conservative, because you want to preserve the situation that you're in, which is winning. He ramps up in aggressiveness. He's actually really aggressive at 50% win probability, and then it just dives down to being super conservative. And Kevin thinks that this is a result of, when the game is lost, I want to preserve my passer rating, which is a very cynical view of it. And I would not be shocked if there were a number of quarterbacks where that was the case. I don't know that this is the case for Cousins, because it would look the exact same if my hypothesis was true, where the coverage is giving you those throws, so he takes those throws. It's not in a way to preserve passer rating or goose your completion percentage rate or whatever. It's a way to execute the offense in the manner that you were taught, because that receiver is open and he's not throwing to closed receivers. And that it results in that too. So he's a by the book quarterback. And because he's a by the book quarterback, you can kind of alter what he does if you've got enough talent on the defense and a good defensive coordinator. And so in games where a defensive coordinator has kind of figured it out, he's just going to be off a lot. It seems like in this game, Steve Spagnuolo, who's supposed to be a pretty good defensive coordinator. The Chiefs' defense, not great, but he's a good coordinator. Figured him out, and he was off. Pagano figured him out, he's off. Pettin figured him out, he's off. Right? But in games where they either don't have the talent or you don't have a good enough coordinator, he's great, which is why he's the NFC Offensive Player of the Month. So who's the real Kirk Cousins? To get all the way back to the beginning of this question, it's the same guy. That's who he is. The problem is that he's like a fairly simple computer program whose glitches are exploitable, right? Remember when we were talking about hey, this defensive coverage will cover 98% of cases, but the other 2%, your SOL. Well, Cousins is like an extreme version of that, where it's going to work in maybe 85% of cases, but the other 15% your SOL. The problem is Zimmer has in-game adjustments. Cousins doesn't. He does the same thing. And when it's bad, it's bad. And the entire game is going to look kind of awful. The only exception I can think of is week 2 against Green Bay, where he was really rough for the first 2.5 quarters. And that's when I tweeted out he's a work in progress. And people got mad at me because the rest of the game, he was brilliant. That's the only time. Other than that, when he's lost, he's lost. And when he's on, he's on. And that's who he is.
Did you just verify the existence of the Kirk Cousins litmus test?
Oh, yeah, from the Michael Kiss take from right before the Eagles game. Yeah, I guess. Wow, Schwartz, bad coordinator. We've proved it.
It's been done. Mike asks, is there a reason we beat everyone but the backup quarterbacks?
Well, let's see. We lost to Rodgers, backup quarterback. We lost to Chase Daniel. Now, he's the starter. That's not fair. And then we lost to Matt Moore. Yeah. No, but actually, so the reason, I don't know that there's a ton of reason, right? Because I think so. Zimmer has a remarkably good record against first and second year quarterbacks. But we think he's bad against a rookie because that game he lost to Josh Allen, right? I don't think that there's. I think it's just kind of. I think it's like the version of this field goal question where your priors are not confirmed. I would have to look it up. I did not look it up, but I don't actually think the Vikings are worse against backup quarterbacks than other teams are against backup quarterbacks. I just think it feels like you should have had this one and you didn't. And so it's easier to look at it because it's like, I can't believe you lost to Josh Allen or Matt Moore or Chase Daniel, who again, he's the better quarterback there. So that doesn't even count. But yeah, because it's not really a film set because they didn't lose to the backup quarterback in Washington, right? They beat that guy. And I asked, I was like, hey, is it difficult? He's had one game of film.
Keenum started though, just saying.
Well, I guess, but
that counts in the world of quarterback wins who ended up starting.
It does count in QB wins.
Yeah.
So if they, but by the same logic, Mitch Trubisky started.
Oh, yeah, you got me on a.
Yeah, it's one or the other.
That's no good. I don't like this logic bomb you're throwing at me. That's no good. Let's go to Matt Free's question real quick. A common thread in our losses is Kirk struggling against interior pressure and missing plays downfield. Do you agree? Feels kind of obvious.
Yes.
Is there hope for Kirk to get more aggressive / accurate when facing that pressure, or do we have to hope that the interior offensive line can hold up for a chance to beat good teams?
What is this, his 7th year in the NFL? Something like that?
Something like that.
That's who he is.
Yeah. At this point, you know what you have. Mikey Hodge asks, what's up with Madison getting less carries?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything in particular. I think when there's more latitude in the game, like when it's early in games and you got, let's say that measure we were using, a 50% win probability, they're more likely to use him. When games are close, but you can still run, but it's late, I don't think they want to give it to the 3rd round rookie. They'd rather give it to their MVP candidate, Dalvin Cook. I don't think it has anything to do with anything. I think it's just like game to game. This will work. This won't work.
This question is from Beef Brewski, who asks, the Ravens have a 300-pound fullback. I firmly believe this is a major reason for their success as a team. Should the Vikings start force-feeding Ham, and Hams so he can help bring our offense to the next level? Why not start hammering the defense with a ham and Hams fed Ham?
If you didn't catch it, there was also a reference to, so Hams is also the beer,
Yes.
which enough of it and you'll get pretty wasted.
And
pretty cheap.
I was going to say, and incredibly sick, and you will not feel decent in the morning. That is...
Yeah. But yeah, that's probably a pretty good weight gain strategy. Is Patrick Ricard really 300 pounds? I don't believe this.
time to consult the book of knowledge. Time to consult Google.
Let's see. Patrick Ricard, Google, 284. That's close enough. I wouldn't be shocked if, like, in a broadcast meeting or something like this guy's 300 pounds, and it's like he's probably gained weight since then. So yeah, he used to be a defensive tackle, I think. So that makes sense.
If he gets tired of drinking hams, he can always just switch to Pig's Eye. So also a decent. I had much better times on Pig's Eye than I ever had on hams. So.
Yeah, and you preserved the puns. That's pretty good.
I'm proud of that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, if he's already unstoppable in space, imagine how unstoppable he'll be, with a belly sloshed full of ham and hams.
Exactly. Raul asks, while no doubt a good coach at baseline, has Zimmer improved as one? In what ways can this be measured?
It's difficult to measure. I wish I had a better answer. There's a couple of ways, like roundabout, that you can measure it. I know that a while ago, Football Perspective, so that's Chase Stewart, crafted a measure called the Dungy Index, which was how many wins above Vegas. It's a good thing. But how many wins above Vegas, or wins in close games and all that, how many wins above expectation based off of Pythagorean, etc. And I think, it was above Pythagorean. So Pythagorean is how many wins you should have based off of your point differential at the end of the season. It's just a way to estimate wins, and it's a better way to predict wins going forward than your actual win-loss, because point differential tends to tell you a lot more about a team than pure win-loss, which is why your close game record actually tells you very little. And so your record above Pythagorean tells you about things like game management and stuff like that. And so Tony Dungy happened to consistently produce 10-win teams, albeit with Peyton Manning. When the Pythagorean told him he was going to get 8-win teams, or 12-win teams when he was going to get 10-win teams, or a 14-win team when he was supposed to get a 12-win team. So he's consistently 2 or so games above expected based off of that measure. And that, I think, will tell you a little bit about coaching. But how do you score points? How do you prevent points? By putting your players in the right spots. So that's coaching too. One method I used last year to figure out the efficacy of DeFilippo, the offensive coordinator, was to take a look at PFF grade versus points per drive. And the further apart you were, the more it said about you as an offensive coordinator, which I later found out is not too dissimilar from the way, and if he listens to this, maybe he'll correct me, but it's not too dissimilar from the way that Eric Eager seems to do coach rankings over at PFF, which is cool. So if your players perform well, but you're not scoring points, probably a lot of that is on you. Probably a lot of that has to do with luck, right? Because red zone stuff, that doesn't, translate from year to year anyway, or even game to game. So who knows? But, generally speaking, if your players are performing well and you're not scoring points, you're not putting your high-performing players in positions where they can help the team. And DeFilippo was one of the worst in the league. I think he was the worst in the league that year. One of the worst since I was looking at it, going all the way back to 2010 or something like that. And so, that's another way to look at it. I haven't used those measures, so I don't know. Has Zimmer gotten better at fourth down decisions? Marginally, but he doesn't seem to have changed his approach according to the way that he talks about it. So I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe. Is he better at time management? Marginally, but not a ton. We already saw some mistakes this year in time management. He's still pretty stubborn about challenges, but if you exclude the PI stuff, he seems to actually have gotten a better challenge rate, the past 2 years than he's had historically. So at the kind of the margins of the stuff that makes a good coach, he's gotten better. In terms of coaching his players, I don't know. That's difficult to tell. So the long and the short is he's gotten better, but probably not by a ton. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't say that like, he's at a position where he's figured it all out, at the edges there. But neither is he at a position where he's definitely gotten worse or anything, because he's had to deal with a lot of adversity. He's been able to produce a lot of wins despite that.
Since you mentioned it, I want to bring up something about his coaching and his timeouts. First, it's worth noting that the Vikings were a recipient of a reversed pass interference call. That said, the pass interference call was atrocious. Yeah.
It was also booth initiated, so you can't say that it was his challenge that did it. But yes, they were the beneficiary of it.
Yeah.
Terrible pass interference call.
Worth mentioning because of how horrible it was on the field. If they were not going to reverse that, you could have rioted and it would have been fine with me at that point. Fine. You don't want to reverse them. Fine. It's clear here. But I wanted to ask about the timeout that he took near the end of the game at a point that personally it didn't make sense that he was calling timeout there, because if you were going to call timeout, you would have called it 25 to 40 seconds earlier. This would have been, I think, the only Minnesota timeout on that final drive of Kansas City, where they called timeout at 25 seconds left.
Yeah, that bad decision. There's nothing else. I mean, why? Yeah. Waited 35 seconds to call it.
Yeah, and what was funny was my 6-year-old was watching the game with me, and he said, "Daddy, are you mad?" As I was just yelling at the TV, "What on earth are you doing? If you would have called that, if you were going to call that, why didn't you call it 25 seconds before?" I think the closest thing I was able to respond to him with was something along the lines of, "Daddy just doesn't understand why the man with the cap over there didn't make the decision to do what he was supposed to do 25 seconds ago, as opposed to what he ended up doing there, which didn't make any damn sense to begin with." And he just stood at me. He just looked at me and went, "Okay." I was like, "Oh, I didn't fix this problem at all." I did not answer his question.
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the wrong defense was just out there. So that might not have been a time management thing. It might have been a getting everybody right kind of thing. Or he knew that this was going to be the critical play, so he just wanted to make sure everything was right. So it was less about making sure there was time on the clock for a comeback and more about, finding a way to make sure that they could get them out of field goal position. Because, that's a 13-yard pass they completed on the next play, right? If they don't complete that field goal probably doesn't go in. So, maybe it's about getting the right play in.
Or overthinking it and getting cute with it, which is apparently what they were doing on offense anyway. So, I mean, yay, overthinking. Colin Scott asks, "It seems like the Vikings defense is overly conservative at the start of the game. If that's true, what should change in our defensive play in the first half? What risks, blitzes, coverages, etc., are the most sound statistically speaking?"
Well, the problem with taking a look at blitz rate and stuff like that is it is enormously dependent on the quality of your personnel and what they've been trained to do. So, you take a look at, the Todd Bowles teams that mainly have been associated with Bruce Arians. He's kind of blitzed regardless, but with the Cardinals, it worked a lot because Patrick Peterson was a really remarkable man coverage corner. And so you could put those guys on an island, create pressure, and then if nobody was open, you get a sack. And so you need to be able to have players that are good at blitzing, which the Vikings have in Anthony Barr and Harrison Smith. And you need players that are good at man coverage, which the Vikings have historically had with Xavier Rhodes and for the last year and a half, Trey Waynes. Before that, Terrence Newman. But, this year it just feels like you don't really have that. Plus, with the Chiefs, it's difficult because of the speed that they have. And so it's difficult to kind of adapt blitz a lot more. And obviously they did do that in the second half. And it was a second half adjustment to be more aggressive, but they weren't even necessarily blitzing all that much more in the second half. They did blitz. Barr got close a couple of times, and it worked once. I think it caused a fumble, and it also nearly caused an incompletion once, and then nearly caused an incompletion the second time. I think both times to Tyreek Hill. So you could say that it worked from a process perspective and it just didn't work on that play. But really, they were much more aggressive about overloading sides of the line and stuff like that, probably because they saw something in the game that they were doing that they had not put on film before that made it easier to overload. And so I think that's really the answer to this, is that it's not that the Vikings have this answer that they refuse to deploy. It's that there's something the other team is doing in the game that is different than what they've been doing for the past 4 weeks, which happens every week if you're a good team because you self-scout and you break your tendencies. And so in the game, they figured out kind of the direction the game plan is going in and they catch up to it. Sometimes that means being more aggressive because maybe they don't have as many option routes out there, or your quarterback doesn't have the power to audible, right? And, with a backup quarterback, you just don't know if they've got that capability because Matt Moore was only playing, 6 quarters before this game. There's a point in that game where I thought Moore should have audibled and he didn't. And maybe that was kind of the tell to the Vikings that, maybe he doesn't have the ability to audible. Maybe that means he doesn't have the ability to hot route. So we're going to blitz a lot more. And so that's just something you find out in the game. So I don't really think it's about poor film study and then I think it's just about really being good at capturing in-game tendencies. And so I don't think the Vikings are necessarily bad at the beginning of games. I think they're just tremendous at the end of games defensively. They still give up that opening score drive, but those are to scripted plays. And so they're designed specifically to attack the Vikings' tendencies and break the offensive tendencies that they typically have over the course of the game. And then after the scripted plays are over, even in the first half, the Vikings tighten up a lot. So I don't know if the Vikings were just not aggressive enough in the beginning of the game. I don't know if that's the case. I just think that the Vikings are just really remarkable at responding. And people ask, well, then why can't you do that for the whole game? And I said, well, you don't know what they're going to do in the game until the game at least starts. And I think that's the problem.
Is that a bit like asking why you can't make the whole plane out of the black box material?
Yes. Yeah.
Mike Ellis asks, in honor of the 300th episode, what are the parallels between the Vikings and the 300 Spartans who made a historic stand only to be slaughtered in the end?
I think you nailed it.
I'm taken aback by the miss by Dan Bailey, because I know that Dan Bailey has been selected in both of the fantasy leagues. Just when you thought it was safe to calve him, he ends up missing and just slaughtering your game. As far as the parallels between the Vikings and the 300 Spartans, I'm just envisioning Mike Zimmer kicking people he's cut off the team into the pit. But other than that, I'm not sure on the actual parallels here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna make I don't even know if
Andy Reid as Xerxes. There's a mental image you'll not be able to get out of your head for a while.
Okay, so here's a couple of things. One, they're historically good at a lot of things, especially third down. Great. The final goal is not to be good against some things. It's to be good enough against all the things. And I guess it turns out you're not good against mountain passes that lead the enemy behind you or whatever, right? So that's one thing. But great against archers, right?
Oh yeah,
cool.
We still need to be aware. We still need to be wary of traitors, though. Right.
Yeah. No, that's the Sendejo problem, right?
You see, he got released. He's gonna go make the XFL more violent again, I think.
Yeah, I think he's more than happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're a great team that fails in the end. I mean that historically, the Vikings have the highest winning percentage of a team that doesn't have a ring, and they've got the most division titles of a team that doesn't have a ring, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
I was gonna make some snide comment after a loss and just ask why are the Vikings great till they gotta be great, and then I decided to just do it in the mailbag instead, apparently. Next question is from Eddie, who asks, in a situation with no cap stipulations, who would you rather have on the Vikings? Aaron Donald or Dree Archer? He was more using this to make fun of somebody, so instead of actually answering the question, I'm getting my clock out, getting my phone ready anyway. Because there's a problem that I need to address with Eddie here, is that I ended up losing in fantasy against Eddie. And it was close. There were ups and downs. According to Yahoo, we both scored A+ games. I would have beaten everyone in the league except for Eddie, and I think one other team. And Arif goaded me into a bad decision. So I need to take the next 2 minutes.
Not like me at all.
Oh, yeah. I need to take the next 2 minutes to talk to you, starting now, about how Eddie is better at fantasy football than me, which is true. I mean, if you look at it statistically, he was able to defeat me despite the fact that his quarterback ended up going out injured very early. And even though it looked like I was going to be able to take the game, in fact, there were 4 lead changes during this fantasy game. I just was not able to get the job done. So Eddie appeared to be better at fantasy football than me on this particular Sunday. In fact, if you look at his draft even, I believe his draft was even better than I was. So I am saying kudos to Eddie for all of your hard work in the Norse Code. I'm trying to draw this out. The Norse Code Fantasy Football League. I am truly humbled by your destruction of the team titled The Ham Package, which is my team. Eddie was quite successful in that and clearly started the right set of players, despite the fact that I had a fantastic performance by a couple of players whose names I cannot seem to think of off the top of my head, but that's not going to stop me from talking. If I remember correctly, my team, however, was bested, even though that I ended up having, I believe, the better team overall, despite the fact that, I had Sanu, who ended up just going crazy there. But he ended up having such fantastic players as Emmanuel Sanders and Tyreek Hill and Singletary and Ertz and Evans, and Daniel Carlson just couldn't miss a kick for me. So, it's too bad. He's also quite good at Twitter, in case you have not followed Eddie the Dog on Twitter. I don't know if he's necessarily better than me on Twitter, but he wants me to say that he is, in fact, better on Twitter than me. 12 more seconds left. It's good to see interaction with such a fine, upstanding citizen, and really a good dog. A very good dog. That's enough of that. Eddie, die in a fire. Next question is from Michael Ertz, who asks, how do you take notes during games when all you do is tweet? Do you use tweets as notes to look back later? Not attacking, just curious.
Not attacking. No, I didn't interpret that as an attack, but now that you've said that. No, I don't know. I just... my editor uses my tweets as notes because I'm just like, I don't know kind of what to write about after the game. And he's like, well, you tweeted these 8 things. Surely you have a take. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty good point. But that's new. I actually haven't had like a back and forth with a lot of people before I write my game takeaways for a long time, which is why I love my editor at The Athletic and I would love a raise. I've bought a house. Please give me more money. But yeah, I don't know. I just sometimes I'll after the game, I've got kind of the game notes in front of, or the game statistics in front of me, and I'll circle them, and I'll just kind of say, well, what do I think about this? Because it's not like I take a look at Kirk had 140 passer rating. I'm like, Kirk had a good game. That's my takeaway. It's more Kirk had 140 passer rating that's driven by a lack of interceptions and a high completion rate and a low yards per attempt. Why would that be? And so, a couple games ago, I would have said, well, actually, Kirk was incredibly accurate because his 3 misses were on 2 drops and a throwaway. So he's really accurate on every throw. That was against, whoever it was. I'm actually very bad at remembering games 2 weeks ago. It wasn't the Raiders, and that's when I first.
Are you talking about the Redskins?
Oh yeah, that's why I don't want to remember them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was accurate in every throw against Washington. And so, what do I take away from that? Is it because, and so I try to tease out basically right after a game why a statistic occurred, and I'll figure it out. And then I'll kind of rewatch the game a little bit really quickly, see how many pressures, he gave up, which you can do really quickly on Game Pass, or pressures he was under and so on. And then I'll write about it. And sometimes I'm halfway through a take in the middle of an article, pull up the film that take kind of revolves around, watch it again. And sometimes, the take isn't correct. And so I'll either rework it to kind of match what happened in the game, or I'll delete it because it's like not the right take, right? And so I don't really take game notes, but I review kind of the record of the game, and I try to remember what I thought about what this represents, right? And so I'm like, oh, hey, the Vikings had 9 penalties in this game. What's that a product of? Well, Xavier Rhodes had 2 of them. Well, how was his game? Well, he gave up 40 yards, but he gave up 2 50-yard penalties. So it's actually a poor game. That I'll write about that. And then I'll watch, the targets that he gave up and the penalties and so on. And that's kind of what I write. So sometimes my tweets kind of give me an accounting of what happened in the game and kind of refresh my memory. And sometimes I'll just kind of take a look at the final bit of the game and work my way through kind of the story that the statistics try to tell.
Next question is from Luke Braun, who asks, the Vikings have an uphill climb to win the division, so suppose they get a wild card instead. For which NFC contending city would you want the excuse to go visit and sample the food? I'm going to let you answer this first because I know my answer.
New Orleans.
That is also mine.
I was like, this is a great question. Kind of. I know the answer. I wouldn't mind Atlanta. That'd be pretty good. They're clearly not going to make it. So that doesn't.
They're not going to make the run. No. Between the 2 LAs really, Louisiana and Los Angeles, I think would be the 2 contending cities that I'd be interested in.
I do love the food in Los Angeles, but I've already been, and I've been to New Orleans twice, so I can't say that. But I haven't aggressively sought out New Orleans food like 3 or 4 days in a row, which is what I like to do. Seattle will have already gone, obviously, so can't choose that. San Francisco, last time I went was like 8-9 years ago for a debate tournament. Loved the food. Would like to go back and update my food takes there. Also, it's very expensive, so I would really need
to get
all of it expensed.
I was gonna say, get it like a true financial backer. You can go on some some sugar mama website, Arif Hassan, for hire.
We'll take for food.
Exactly. Exactly. That I feel like that's your lot in life. That's actually what all of this has been building toward. It hasn't been building toward the Athletic or going to these games or going to Kansas City for to cover football games. No, it's led to this moment. We'll take for food in a decent food city, if nothing else. Next question is from Don from Ohio, who asks, which one goes and why? Shoestring fries, curly fries, steak fries, or tater tots?
Shoestring fries, curly fries, steak fries, or tater tots. Which one do I get rid of?
Yep.
The shoestring fries.
Yeah, I gotta go shoestring fries simply because they're just. I like curly fries more, and I saw a take about curly fries being able to lose.
So they've got a seasoning on them, and you can actually just put them on anything else. But I think that's not 100% accurate, although it's a good consideration to make.
Yeah.
But I think the shape and the texture of the curly fries, where the parts where the fry meets itself, is not crispy, but the part on the outside is crispy. That's part of the essential texture of a curly fry.
Yeah.
That's important too.
And the steak fry, I prefer my fries to be thicker cut anyway. So the fact that steak fries is on
strictly superior to the shoestring fry. And you can get, if they're double fried, you can get a super creamy steak fry that's really crispy on the outside. Where with the shoestring, that's just not a textural thing you can have.
Yeah. And tater tots belong at the table as well. So I mean, between the two, I'd be more likely to toss out tater tots than I would be curly fries. But.
Right, but I can get what I like the most from shoestring fries, from the steak fries and the curly fries. So if I have to eliminate one, it's going to be, and I like all of them. If I'm going to eliminate one, it's going to be the one where the parts I like can be replicated by the other three.
Exactly. And finally tonight, Don from Ohio also asks, more surprising, Norse Code made it to 300 episodes or Dusty being killed off the show? Also, aren't you guys concerned that your show will go the way of The Walking Dead and Dexter, meaning getting significantly worse as time goes by?
The Walking Dead and Dexter were both great in season 1, so that comparison does not hold at all.
Not at all. I've listened to a lot of Norse Code recently, and the first the audio quality, especially in the first couple seasons, is questionable at best. Despite the fact that you had a very able producer at your hands, the show quality was not good.
Oh, I mean, it's the tools, right? You give a master carpenter some Fisher Price tools, and you're not going to get a good product. So
let's go with that.
Yeah, but I would. So that comparison doesn't work. What's more surprising? Dusty getting killed off, or the fact that we made it to 300 episodes? Well, Dusty didn't get killed off. That never happened. Who is Dusty?
Exactly. I'm not aware of anyone named Dusty. Nobody named Dusty has texted me like 16 times today.
So
not once.
Obviously, it's more surprising that we hit 324 episodes.
Callback, ladies and gentlemen. And we're using that because of the answer that Dusty had given in episode 100, which actually leads me to a brief discussion, or not really brief discussion, just a brief announcement before we wrap up. As a special thank you to everyone who's listened to the show and everything, I realize the episode's gone a little long, but what I've done is included at the end of this episode, after you hear me say goodbye, during our usual, our motto is this, we have a little clip show that I'm going to toss on the end of the episode, and I'm also going to upload to YouTube as a separate file as well. This is kind of what I thought was kind of our best work over the last few years, which is also to say it's not very football oriented, but deal with it. There's which which might as well just be the name of the episode, quite frankly, but our best work is not football oriented, but it's a lot of fun stuff. It's a lot of the inside jokes we've made over the years, stuff that is continually referenced over the years, such as is Avril Lavigne alive? That question is answered in here, and the only way that Arif can. We've got we've got a bunch of clips, and we have a bunch of fun, and Dusty freaks out for a considerable amount of it over potato salad, which is easily one of my favorite moments from the entirety of this show. So I made a little clip show for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy it. Again, I'll put it up on YouTube as well if you just kind of like that as a standalone, or would just like to listen to that specifically sometime, because it is funny. And it does include the conversation about the island, about who would survive on the island, Arif, Dusty, or myself. One of us has to die. And apparently Arif had never heard of dad strength before. So that was... I
hadn't?
Well, the way you reacted would imply no. But
okay.
It's totally worth listening to.
I believe you. I just feel like I've been aware of the concept of dad strength for so long. I didn't know what the progenitor of this knowledge was.
Yes, well,
interesting.
At the time I had a 2-year-old, and so I was just comparing the fact that I was carrying a kettlebell everywhere I went as a way of building up strength. I think Dusty said something along the lines of, yeah, he's got this oddly shaped thing that he carries around and cries. Like, this is how one builds dad strength. So if you are interested in such things, hang out after the show. We have a great little clip show for you. So hopefully you enjoy it. It's some of our best work. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I've got a piece recapping the game at The Athletic. Seems to be getting a better response than normal, so definitely check that out. And which is crazy because I wrote it on the drive up, and I was just like, I have no idea what I'm saying. I'll just type some stuff. Turn it into my editor, and he's like, "This Arif, this is not cut it down. And so,
in long form, yeah.
Right. And it's already a pretty long article in its final. But like, I was like, okay, I have to work on this. I was delirious. I was typing like sentences that didn't make sense when I reread them. So I took a 5 hour and I just blasted through it, and then I submitted it. And it's apparently one of my better game recaps. So that's how writing works. So check that out at The Athletic.
Stay in school. Stay in school, kids.
Yeah, I didn't. But I've also got a piece about Afadi Odenigbo, who I think has been just really remarkable, but people haven't talked about him. Coming up, I don't know if that's this week or next week. Hopefully I'll be able to talk to a couple of people, get that piece fleshed out. So yeah, check that out over at The Athletic. Like I said, as on the Straight Cash podcast, check that out. That's with The Athletic. I don't usually mention this podcast on this podcast, but also The Football Machine with Luke Inman and Sam Ekstrom. So a lot of podcasts. You'll probably hear a lot of the same takes, but with other people now.
There you go. So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. This is a fun little celebration. Well, we might do something nicer at the live show in Seattle at Podolsky's on November 29th. I'm just going to go by memory. Am I correct? I am November 29th in Seattle at Podolsky's. So, again, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, let's just say that our motto is Christian Ponder sucks. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.
And this is the clip show that I had alluded to in episode 300. So if you are offended by cursing, as always, the clip shows contain a fair amount of cursing, so just prepare yourself for that. This is 50 minutes or so of what I feel is some of our best work. If you have things that you enjoy, please send them out, or please retweet them, and just let us know what you loved about the last 300 episodes of Norse Code. But let's start off with Dusty's explanation of how the show came to be in episode 100. But you know what we haven't done in a really long time? We haven't done a number of the week. Can we start off episode 100 with a number of the week, Dusty?
We can give it a shot. I mean, honestly, since you're driving the show, there's literally no other reason for me to be here. So I'm gonna execute it on the number of the week, and then probably take off until the mailbag. I'm gonna try to kill the fly that's flying around my studio. I'll let you know if I succeed. But number of the week. So I have several. You mentioned
for episode 100. What possibly could the number of the week be?
Well, so this is episode number 100, but this is not the 100th episode per se.
What?
I know, shocking, right? Longtime listeners will know that many of our episodes from the first season ran a little long.
That's putting it mildly.
And consequently, a lot of them were split up into two-parters, but they were not, numbered separately. So if we're being truly shallow and pedantic about it, episode number 100 is technically the 124th episode of Norse Code. So this is an entirely made-up, meaningless milestone that we are celebrating right now with this.
Blaspheme!
Blaspheme! I will not celebrate meaningless milestones.
Wait, but also all of these milestones are meaningless. I mean, it's based on the base 10 system, which we have because of the number of fingers that we have. I mean, it's 100 is as arbitrary as 124. It's a milestone.
That's fair. So episode number 100, we'll do a little number of the week for you. James first guest hosted an episode of Norse Code, episode 4. I made it a whole 3 episodes before needing to tag out.
Before your laptop went rogue and we had to step in.
It's true. It was one of the CIA destabilizers in Syria, I guess, is what I've heard. I've only gotten postcards from around the world addressed to me from my laptop, so I just have to guess.
I like how when I was originally brought on for to assist with the show, because you and I had an idea for doing another show, and then you would talk to Arif, and it seemed like this was going to happen, and you really sold me on the idea of the show by stating, "It's okay, James, you don't have to be back on the air. You don't have to talk to people."
I know. I totally pitched it to James. I was like, this will be great. I know you've got a newborn. The reason we couldn't do States Rights Minute anymore was because, you just didn't have time to be on the air. And I was like, don't worry, James. We just need you to do a little bit of back-end editing stuff. 4 episodes later, he's hosting like 8 episodes in a row. And now, in our 3rd season, we finally gotten to the point where even though I'm on the show, James is still hosting.
Yeah.
So
I was brought in under the guise of not being able to do a thing other than editing, which was totally fine with me. And now I'm stuck on here.
I'm glad that the facade crumbled early for you, though. Well, episode 4, that's incredible.
It reveals how transparent my scheme to be able to take credit for something where I did none of the work truly was.
Who's hosted more episodes? I think this is a legitimate question. Do we know?
I started to do a breakdown of it, and it was getting ugly. Like the numbers just
it's getting ugly.
Yeah.
Well, no, it depends on how you count the 2-part episodes. Because if you count the 2-part episodes, then I'm pretty sure it's me and it's not close. But if each of those episodes where we broke it into 2 parts counts as 1, I think we're getting pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah, it's about 50-50 thanks to the 2 parting. Like if you just count times recorded, then it's split pretty evenly 50-50. Which again, I was brought on for editing purposes only. So what the hell am I doing here? I was actually
You're so good at it. The fans love you.
I was listening to I was actually listening to episode 4 the other day just because I was curious what it still sounded like, and Arif and I had the relationship or had the rapport of people who hadn't talked in over 20 years. Like that was
shocking.
I know, right? Because that's exactly what it had been. Like you were a neighbor of mine way back when, and were really good friends with my brother. And yeah, we just got up and started running about the Vikings. So several episodes later, here we are, and we have inside jokes, and I still kind of hate Dusty for the fact I'm not just editing.
You do not.
Yeah,
you do not hate it. Not hate it. That is a lie.
I do have one question for you before we let you go.
Okay.
How old is Blake Bortles really?
I think that he's younger than 40. I'm not sure like how exact old he is, but I would say younger than 40. I would put money on that.
But we can all agree that he's not actually 24, right?
If he is, he's the oldest 24. Like he might be like Tom Coughlin's grandson. Like that might be. I was just thinking that. Like he went out to eat with Tom Coughlin when he was young, and Tom Coughlin told him all his war stories, and Blake's hair just started to go when he was like 11.
The beard started coming in at like 12. Yeah.
Oh man. Poor Blake, dude. Because I like it. He's a good guy, and he's nice to the fans. Like he's real chill with everybody in Jacksonville. But dude, come on, man.
He seems so cool, but
it was bad. Blaine Gabbert was much easier to hate. Much easier.
Well, he just like blocked everyone on Twitter, and then he didn't. He just kind of
which was fantastic because then you can tweet them whenever you want. Like I avoid adding players because I think that's rude. Like they're people too, like, and they already had a bad game, so I avoid like adding the players that they're performing badly. But Blaine, it didn't matter because you'd be like, "Hey, dude, saw you fishing," and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, blocked." like, sorry, man.
Don't look at
Blaine
me.
would be like, "Happy birthday! Thanks for your service, veterans. Like, thanks for reaching out, Blaine. Appreciate it." "Oh yeah, really? You thank me?" Block.
No, this is 100% true. Like, this is not even an exaggeration. You could tweet compliments to him. You could tweet nothings to him. You could be a PR person reaching out to like set up an advertisement or whatever. He would just block you. It's incredible. You could really tell him like, "Hey, you played great. Don't let everybody else get you down." Blocked. Like it did not matter what you said to him. If you added him, you were getting blocked, which is a power move. I mean, that's an absolute power move. If you at me on Twitter, I will block you no matter what. Kind of the antithesis of what the platform is for, but I mean, I respect it. I'm using this medium in its intended way.
Block.
How dare you at me on this website? Maybe he's just nude all the time. Because I have that standing rule. Don't at me while I'm
Those who
nude.
don't have when you're nude, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he just goes around nude.
That's probably it.
I think I've added enough references to the movie The Rock. I feel like I hit the number that I told you I was trying to hit. So I think we're good.
You hit your own over-under, so we're good.
Yeah, I think I did.
Well, all right. Enjoy the big game, everyone. We will join you again this postseason with the beginning of the Draft-a-Palooza. Perhaps with a guest, perhaps not. But one way or another, we can promise you optimal digital multimedia content from the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, Norse Code. So until then, our formula is this. Losers whine about their best. Winners go home and bone the prom queen. We'll see you next week.
Wow. What a finish. That was the strongest part of the show.
I'm so glad I muted myself there.
Did I get you?
Yeah, you got me. I have had such a shitty last like few nights of sleep where I'm like just about to crack, and that cracked me. That was oh my god, the tears. Okay. Well, thank you for going over on the references to The Rock.
But you missed like the ultimate, like that is the money quote from The Rock.
Yes,
And if not that, it's Nick Cage looking meaningfully into the camera and going, "Farrah was the prom queen."
the prom queen. Yeah.
That moment has stuck with me ever since 1996. I've been quoting that movie ever since 8th grade.
Oh, we used to say it on the bus for debate. I remember Peter Metzger trying terribly to do a Sean Connery impression, and
Losers always whine about that bashed.
which just sounds like Bane now.
Oh my god, you're right.
It does.
Oh, that's too bad. It's too bad that the Sean Connery impressions have like merged into Bane impressions.
That's just me. I would have to practice, get some good differentiation, because it does. Like I think about it and I'm like, you merely adopted the darkness. I was born it.
Well,
pretty much the same.
It's the Kevin thing from earlier. Victory has defeated you.
Well, the best part is I know we're all imagining Bane Cat. I was wondering, breakfast.
Okay, so my favorite is that I'm imagining Bane saying all of these to Alex Trebek. I was wondering who would break first.
Your mind or your body?
Oh my God! All right. For you. It's Celebrity Jeopardy with Bane and Sean Connery. If they could get into a shouting match, if Daryl Hammond and maybe Tom Hardy could get into a shouting match, that would be
That would be amazing. I'd lose it.
I'm like, apparently I'm not good at using Skype because I saw you send it to me, but now I don't actually know where the chat is on here.
Oh,
I got it. Yeah, I got
there
it.
you go. Yeah, it's in the little word bubble.
Public assistance board game. Oh God. Well, you should have just told me the subtitle. That why bother working for a living?
Look at the pictures of like some of the spaces on the board.
Oh God!
The cards, like the
also, okay. Can we also talk about how shittily it's wrapped in plastic? Like, what is this plastic wrap they put on it?
Well, I mean, like, freaking surprise focus on the family doesn't like. I don't know who it is, but essentially,
yeah, it looks like they took like previously plastic wrap from something else and like just sort of barely wrapped it around.
Yeah, or like they just like wrapped it in a clear plastic bag, like it's tied on the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what is your issue with this potato salad guy?
It represents it's like all the worst things about the internet all rolled into one.
What? It's not the worst thing. The worst thing about the internet is all the fucking harassment.
Well, okay, that's fair. But the second worst thing, well, it exposes the okay.
It's not second to cyberbullying.
It's all right. Look, if you're going to talk about actual tragedies, it's not as bad as abortion either, but I was going to say it was. But seriously, this whole thing, first of all, some Yahoo is like, oh, you know, it would be really funny if I made a Kickstarter where I wanted to make potato salad. I'll just ask for like $10. And, you know, that's fine. It's dumb, but it's fine. It's not what Kickstarter is for. I'm a little butthurt because we tried to get Dovetail founded with a Kickstarter project, and that's actually a really good idea, and we didn't even come close. I guess we should have offered to make potato salad. We would have fucking hit our target 4 times over.
Oh, my God. The money that went to this dude for potato salad would not have gone to literally any other Kickstarter.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that is what sucks about the internet, is that there are all kinds of people who have too much disposable income, who are, you know, probably a lot like us, you know, men of, you know, education and greater means than us, obviously, in their 20s and 30s, who, you know, have more money than they need, and they're just like, oh, you know, I use all this, you know, I download all my music because I'm too cheap to pay for it, and, you know, I listen to all this stuff and I critique it because I'm too cheap to pay for it, and I bitch about how Facebook puts ads in my face all the time because I'm too cheap to pay for it, but I'll piss away a bunch of money on some idiot's potato salad that he's probably not even going to make. It doesn't even look that good, and I'm never going to eat it, but potato salad, here's $20. Like,
okay, so to be clear, your issue is not with this kid who magically made $70,000, right? Because I'm totally all about this kid.
No, I mean, look, anyone can win the lottery. I am not, and I honestly don't believe that he set out like, oh, I'm going to scam the internet into giving me $70,000, and all I have to do is pretend to make potato salad. I don't think it's
he's going to make the potato salad. Is there any question he's not going to make the potato salad?
He fucking better.
Like right? Like,
he's. I mean, I'm sure
his $70,000 to make a $10 potato salad. I would make a ton of potato salad.
Well, if I was him, I would make a $70,000 potato salad. I would be on the internet buying black truffles.
No, you fucking wouldn't.
Yeah, I would.
You would want You would want to keep maybe 65,000 of those dollars.
Well, I would never do this in the first. I could still make truffle potato salad with $5,000. I would never do this in the first place because I'm not an idiot. But
Arif, do you see why we wanted to wait till after the show for this?
This is phenomenal. No, I understand.
But
so, okay,
no,
if the issue is generalized class hatred, I can get behind you. Yeah,
it's not generalized class hatred. It is specific to the internet and maybe the subset of people who use things like Kickstarter. It is this belief that every useful product on the internet, everything we like about the internet should be free so that we have enough money to just throw at whims that make us laugh and clap our hands for 5 minutes.
The kind of people who gave this dude like $200 to have a potato salad or whatever. Actually, you know what? I hope he fucking just trolls people and buys a potato salad. I hope he doesn't make it at all.
I would like half a pint of mustard potato salad, please. And then take a picture of it.
with the price tag of 10.
and then a picture of him just like throwing cash around and just like, yay!
He's rolling around in cash like Huel in Breaking Bad.
A kiddie pool of coins.
He's got that next to.
Someone told him he needs to keep some of this around for taxes.
I hope not. I hope he ends up in debtor's prison because he didn't actually make potato salad.
He's going to be rolling
agreement
around.
on Kickstarter that you have to do the thing that people agree to.
Exactly. Rolling around in cash like Huel from Breaking Bad, right next to his container of Hugo's potato salad.
Exactly. Or if he could take a picture of the potato salad on top of like stacks of money, that would be fine. It's all very silly. It's fine.
Okay, so but like,
I don't think Kickstarter should change its terms of
was,
service or anything. I don't think it should be illegal to do what this guy did. I just think it's stupid, and this kind of behavior should not be encouraged. There are enough real fucking problems in the world and enough people trying to make useful things that maybe we can spend some of our hard-earned fucking software development dollars or whatever idiot thing we do to become wealthy in our early 20s and frivolously fucking make other people.
So it's not even the action of people wasting $200. It's the symbolism of the action, because like people were not going to spend that money anyway, right? So it's like it's what that action represents that you hate so much, right? So, but these are the same people that go to like novelty stores and buy like Shakespeare insult gum, right? Like it's like the same thing. I guess they get something, but they don't really get anything. It's Shakespeare insult. It's shitty tasting gum, and they're shitty insults, and they're Shakespeare insults on a piece of gum.
Okay, but look at the Kickstarter website just itself, and I know there are people that hang out on Kickstarter with lots of money looking for projects to support. That's just what they do. They throw money at Kickstarter projects. They have whatever budget, and that's fine. Your example, like there are so many worthwhile projects on Kickstarter, and I'm sure
they didn't like go. They're like, oh, I wonder what's on Kickstarter.com. They got shared the thing. They go to the thing.
Yeah, and so what we ended up with was a situation where the novelty store was full of opportunities to donate to Planned Parenthood or your local homeless shelter or a political candidate or a food bank or something, and instead you got the gum that turns your mouth blue.
But that assumes that they walked into the novelty store. Someone walked out of the novelty store with this gum and was like, hey, you know what'd be funny? Have some gum. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. Without thinking, hey, that novelty store like down the block has a way for me to support Planned Parenthood, which would be really great. No, they're just like, yeah, gum's pretty cool, I guess.
I mean, yeah, I guess, but I mean, maybe I'm too old to appreciate nonsense, novelty like that. But like,
I'll be sure not to wear my Spokanistan shirt anywhere near you then.
Ugh.
Or my Linsanity shirt.
Yeah, please don't. That's a bit much.
It's a great shirt.
Is it really?
It says Linsanity on it, so that's a lot of points for it.
Are you sure about that?
And I specifically made sure it had no Knicks paraphernalia on it because I knew he wasn't going to stay with the Knicks for long because he's like an average player, right? And so it has like sort of Knicks-ish colors, but not really. It just looks like a basketball color. So it's great. If it had Knicks gear on it, that would be pretty bad. But it doesn't. It's just about Jeremy Lin. Fantastic shirt.
That's impressive.
That's money that would have gone to potato salad Kickstarter.
Is it really?
Well, I mean, I guess that's not the direct opportunity cost, but it's not like that's not money that would have gone to feed the homeless. Is my point.
Yeah, and I know I'm making kind of a stretchy argument. I guess the thing that I take issue with the most is just the sense of sheer frivolity that the internet kind of creates in people.
Yeah, okay.
And
right. It's the fact that the symbol of what this action represents got promoted, right? That it's in your face.
Yeah, well, and it does particularly grind my gears as somebody who has made things for people that they enjoy, or done things for people that they enjoy, and getting them to give me any fucking money at all is like pulling teeth. But it makes me feel like the good things that I have done, the art that I've created, the websites I've done, the podcasts, all that stuff, that it is somehow worse than frivolous. It's not even worth fucking potato salad money. And I don't like that feeling. And I know it's not a fair way to feel about it because they're not even close to the same thing. I mean, Norse Code is very unlikely to go viral just for the subject content. But I used to believe that about potato salad too, and look how wrong I was.
But if you had asked Arif, let's say someone puts up a Kickstarter for potato salad, or produces a really engaging podcast about a very specific subject, which do you think would receive more donations? And I would say the podcast. But if you had asked which one is most likely to go viral and receive an insane amount of support, definitely
the potato salad, and it's not even close. Potato salad thing is an example of the fucking cat and Star Wars obsessed idiocy part of the internet.
Yeah, what the fuck is wrong with Star Wars?
Lots.
No, you do not. Arif, trust me on this. You've gone down one rabbit hole. You don't want to go down another.
Hold on.
You don't have to stay and listen.
We don't have to go down this rabbit hole.
We can if you want.
I just want to know if if your issues with Star Wars go away if I call it a space fantasy instead of science fiction.
No, it's still the plot still doesn't make any sense. It's still
Does it have?
No.
You're right. I'm done. Okay, fine.
I've known Dusty a lot of years, and this is not something that is going to go well for you.
James,
I'm going to bring this up
James
later.
can tell you, I fucking hate Star Wars.
Jeez. I guess I'm not going to touch that for now.
Okay, I will say that I will definitely see the new movie or movies, probably like right when they come out, so I can
That's
yell.
the worst thing you could do if you hate Star Wars.
But how else will I be able to yell intelligently about how much they suck?
I guess that's a good point. That's why I initially got into Harry Potter, and then I realized I liked it.
Well,
yeah.
Luckily that hasn't happened with Star Wars because with every single movie, except for the second one, they've gotten progressively worse. And they were never that good to begin with.
As in episode 5?
Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
Okay, no, that's fair. I don't consider like the episodes 1 through 3 part of Star Wars.
That's cheating.
Series
Like the Mission Impossible series is amazing if you only take the first one. Like the Transformers series is amazing if you only take the first one.
Your example is also one I'm totally fine with. That's like you didn't like what the logical conclusion of this is, Reef. People will like specific things. Oh no.
Well, I would like to paint you with the broadest possible Star Wars brush. So those are
fantastic.
Some of the.
Your better argument is that I have read the expanded universe novels, and that I should be shamed for.
You should. You are correct.
But okay, anyway, so regardless of, I guess, cats and Star Wars, hey, I will say this. The dude handled that so well. He was like, I guess my next goal is $300. I'll make it really fancy. And then after he got $300, he was like, okay, should we just make hats? I think I want to make hats. Like, that was like totally, and he was like, let's make hats for everybody. And then he was like, okay, so this is a lot of money, and I totally didn't expect this.
I no longer understand. I no longer know what's reasonable here, I think is what he said.
Yeah, right. He's like, so I'm going to rent a tent and make potato salad for anybody who can come? I think he handled this totally really well. So I'm just going to give him credit for that.
No, I support the person that made the Kickstarter. He seems like a pretty cool dude. He's got his head on straight, and yeah, no, his responses to this whole nonsense have been. I'm going to stop just short of saying admirable, because I don't want to admire anyone involved in this fiasco. It is the donors with whom I have a bone to pick.
So, but like the first donors, you don't have a problem with. Like somebody who's like, yeah, I'll throw you like $250 or whatever, right? You don't have.
Are you going to make me pick a dollar amount? Are you going to make me tell you how many people are allowed to die in a war?
I'm not going to make. I'm just saying, the person who was like, there's $0 donated to this poor man's potato salad mission. I'm going to give him $250, right? But reasonably, you have an issue with somebody who was like, this dude has raised $35,000. That's hilarious. Here's another 200, right? Like that's more of a problem, right?
That's idiocy. That is so stupid.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get. Okay, I'm cool.
I think actually, I feel like John Kerry said it best when he was testifying before Congress, when he said, "How do you ask a man to be the last man to stupidly give money to somebody making potato salad?"
All right, with that, I gotta go. You guys have fun.
All right, see you, James. Thanks for being on the show.
James.
Yeah, things went horribly wrong. So again, you need to take a look at these. We'll be tweeting this out on the Norse Code on the Norse Code's Twitter account. It'll also be in the show notes. You need to take a look at this picture, but I think what we're going to do is read our responses to what Jay Cutler looks like. Dusty, start us off. Or didn't? No, I wrote the first one. Sorry, it says Dusty above that. So
Great job.
yeah, not like I wanted to sleep or anything tonight. All right, 3, 2, 1. So we're going to read our individual responses to this. So my first one was that Jay Cutler looks like a guy at a methadone clinic.
To me, he looks like a guy that was in a $600,000 car theft ring that just got busted up in Denver. The mugshots of the 6 ringleaders were mugshots of homeless crack addicts.
Homeless crack addicts. He looks like one of those cops that has 1 day left till retirement.
Jay Cutler's the face of the opiate crisis.
It could be your family. It could be a friend. It could be a quarterback for the Dolphins.
You don't know. Jay Cutler looks like someone who was just told that he is the father on Maury. And now he has to decide whether or not the kid will be vaccinated.
Jay Cutler looks like somebody who keeps borrowing money from an ever-expanding circle of people in order to pay off everyone else.
Jay Cutler looks like his dad stayed up until 1 a.m. waiting for him to come home drunk from a popular kids party in high school.
Jay Cutler looks like a Giants fan this year.
Ooh.
Jay Cutler looks like someone who thinks he's in the middle of successfully convincing someone that his 84 Camaro with a spare tire and a different colored hood is worth $4,500.
You know, when I read that, I thought, well, that's oddly specific.
But it has a brand new differential that took like 2 weeks to install.
Look, you go to autotrader.com. These things are selling for $5,500. Really, this is a steal.
Jay Cutler looks like he just got suspended for tweeting.
Jay Cutler looks like Bannon's illegitimate child.
Jay Cutler looks like he got caught escaping from a leper colony.
Ugh.
Jay Cutler looks like he mixes flour with cocaine to extend the high.
Oh.
Jay Cutler looks like he's standing in line for water in Puerto Rico.
Oh,
that's sad. That's sad.
Jay Cutler looks like he was deeply affected by the death of Tom Petty.
Jay Cutler looks like he thinks Puerto Rico is the name of the hooker he hired 3 nights ago.
Does Puerto Rica?
Come on, man.
Jay Cutler looks like he was getting charged up for a team meeting with his girlfriend in the office.
Oh.
Jay Cutler topical.
Jay Cutler looks like he just endured a Saturday afternoon at IKEA.
With no meatballs.
No meatballs. None.
Jay Cutler looks like he's been babysitting the president.
Jay Cutler looks like he...
That's a Bob Corker reference, by the way. That is, we are not an explicitly political podcast.
Yes. If anything, we stick to sports here.
Stick to sports.
Jay Cutler looks like he just discovered the hooker's penis.
Ooh. We gotta cut that out, man.
Fine.
I'm sorry, we gotta cut that out.
That's what he said about the hooker's penis.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, all right. Jay Cutler looks like he just lost a fight with a surly drag queen.
And finally, Jay Cutler's fiance isn't okay with the seating arrangement 3 days before the wedding reception.
He looks beat up. That's what we're trying to say. He looks like he's had a rough night.
He looks like Al.
He looks like he's had like a rough 3 weeks. He looks like he was just hanging out with Blake Bortles for the last couple days.
He looks like someone who was retired and then forcibly not retired. Oh wait.
Aww. He could have been naked on that beach. He could still be naked on that beach. No more.
In some sense, he's always naked on that beach.
This question is from me. I did not tweet it.
Oh.
But
Okay.
Arif, do you believe that Avril Lavigne is still alive?
I don't know. I'm genuinely concerned. I think there's enough questions here.
Well, so is it just because she's been like out of the spotlight for so long that you're not certain that she is who she says she is, or is it just that her makeup makes it easy to like send a body double in her place? Like, because that's like one of the conspiracy theories floating around the internet is that Avril Lavigne is dead and has been dead for what, like 2 years now, and a body double has been
much longer than 2 years.
Oh, really?
Like 14 years.
So Avril Lavigne was never like a real thing. Well, no, I guess that would be so she put out like one album, dated a guy from Sum 41,
and recorded the second.
Recorded the second, and then died, and
then the second album comes out. It's her voice, but like it's the new performer.
So there's a new performer like lip syncing every Avril Lavigne song like from the second album, and all subsequent Avril Lavigne music is like fake.
Yeah, well, the voice is different, and I know that that's actually not that compelling given how much production can affect the process. But the voice is different, the music's significantly different, her style suddenly changed, and yes, these are all things that pop stars, go through. But it happened really quickly, significantly, all at once. All of the music on the 2007 album is really sad, potentially suicidal, and the jawline is different. The height of it, according to some random Brazilian website that I want to trust, the heights are different. Some people say, I think the lips look a lot different. That's like the most compelling thing to me because Avril Lavigne has very distinctive lips. It's got this curl. And the new one, evidently her name is Melissa. The new one, actually, this is my favorite thing about this conspiracy, is that whenever the Avril Lavigne Twitter account tweets, people will just respond with, "Nice try, Melissa." I think that's great. But it's just amazing. That's exactly what an imposter would say, Melissa.
Indeed it is.
But yeah, I mean, there's not a chance that she grew smaller, right? She was already pretty small. Why would she get shorter, Dusty? I don't know what the answer is. Except we have a pretty good hypothesis. Here's the thing. We already have interviews from when Avril Lavigne was alive of Melissa, the body double that she employed at the time. They were already teaching her to sound like Avril.
Wait, she had a body double? This is...
Yeah, I mean, almost all celebrities have body doubles.
Wow.
This is just like to protect her for like paparazzi and stuff.
Wow, so she was like in training. So every celebrity has like their body double in training, basically, in case they like die and want to keep it a secret.
No, not like I don't. No, the only reason that she was learning to sound like Avril Lavigne because they were best friends and they thought it'd be fun if she sounded like. It wasn't like, I think it was a happenstance thing. I don't think it was like a premeditated. In case she dies, Melissa, you will take over. I think it was just, oh my God, she's dead. Nobody can know. Melissa, you have to bear this burden for the next 15 years until Twitter finds out.
Well, why can't Avril Lavigne just be dead?
Well, because then you wouldn't be able to sell the music.
Are you kidding me? Like, artists do much better.
In the short term, that new album that she recorded right before she died, you're going to do monster numbers. Of course it is. But it was already going to do pretty good numbers. Not as good as if she died right before its release. But you're not going to get the 2013, 2014 hits. You're not going to get Girlfriend, where she steals some dude's girlfriend. Or Kawaii, where she tries to be cute in Japan.
Name one artist who is less successful posthumously.
All of them, because they couldn't make more albums. Like, Amy Winehouse sold a lot of the one album. Great. I think if she lived longer, the cumulative sales of 4 albums would be a lot more.
She ends up selling more albums. All right.
Name one artist posthumously. Like, wait, all of them, man.
Well, no, all I'm saying is that existing catalogs get a pretty significant sales bump when an artist dies. It happened in Nirvana.
And it's a one-time bump. And why wouldn't you wait until at least 4 albums are out before you're like, oh, she's dead, she killed herself. Now all 4 albums can sell.
So
it only makes sense, Dusty.
I have listened to more Prince music since he died than way before that he was alive.
That's just a personal failing on your part.
No, Prince is way more. No, Prince is way more famous now.
I
Prince
know.
is definitely way more famous now that he's dead. So
what do you mean Prince is more famous now? If Prince had died after his first album, he wouldn't have made whoever owns the rights to his album, maybe Michael Jackson, wouldn't have made nearly as much money as if Prince continued producing hits decades into the future like he did.
Michael Jackson, another example of an artist who is more popular now that he's dead.
Thriller was the best-selling album of all time before he died.
Well, yeah, and he wouldn't have sold it like. First of all, if he had completed his like crazy O2 Arena like quote unquote tour thing, it would have been that, and then he would have gone back to selling like basically no records. But there's been like since his death, there's been a resurgence in like mid catalog Michael Jackson fandom.
That's great. He needed to have developed that mid-catalog stuff first. If he had died after his first solo album, no one would have cared. They'd have been like, oh, child stars, this happens.
He's no longer bankrupt because he died.
Well, yeah, that's true. You're just making my argument for me. You want your artist to die after they've got a good decade of music out there.
Well, so maybe that argument applies to Avril Lavigne as well. Like maybe if she does like kill herself after her second album, it's like, oh, she was what, like 19? Like, oh, that's sad. But...
Right. Exactly. If she dies now, there's so much money.
Speaking of Prince,
good job, Melissa. Good job.
So here's my question then. My last question. I feel like we've dug pretty deep on this one. Will Avril Lavigne ever die? Like, will we wait for Melissa to die of natural causes and then just have a great big funeral for Avril Lavigne?
No, I think Melissa's a unique case because she already spent a lot of time with Avril. And hold on, also, here's something. Avril Lavigne, 2007 album, a lot like the 2002 or 2003 album, whatever it is, hates it's very early 2000s. I hate preps. I'm in alt punk, whatever. But hates the trappings of whatever you want to call preppy rich boy, whatever high school. And then that's exactly who she becomes after that album's released. That doesn't make any sense. That album already hates, girls who wear pink, and then she wears pink all the time. Immediately. Styles change gradually, Dusty.
So you think that it is a result of Avril Lavigne literally becoming someone else and not just like an image change?
Yeah, it's not like a Madonna style transformation.
All right.
Do we have any more questions, or are we just ending on the Avril Lavigne conspiracy?
No, I think we've hit peak Norse Code. There's there's no better place to end than with your vehement defense of Melissa as Avril Lavigne.
The jawlines are different, Dusty. It's all there.
Well, okay, do you have this link to this Brazilian newspaper? Will you put that in the show notes so that listeners can weigh in for themselves?
Yeah, well, I'll put the first link of the tweet thread, the first tweet of the tweet thread I found it in, so you can go through the entire conspiracy. Because, that's how conspiracies get unraveled these days, through tweet threads. Thank you, Louise Mensch.
That's, I might cut that sentence out. I don't think anyone should say that.
Okay, fair enough. No one should ever say that. That's fair.
I think we have our episode title. No.
Fucking Christ.
I forgot what I had named the show.
Also, if we're naming, this is much better, right?
It took every ounce of strength I had not to spit take that. Oh my God.
The worst part is that this is terrible Christmas show material because we didn't actually say what you named the show.
This might be the most offensive thing that we've ever done that nobody knows about.
You're right, that doesn't involve a board game.
Oh, well, I'm bringing that, by the way, to Seattle, so we're gonna.
Oh my God!
We're gonna have to figure out that. Wow, episode 293 may have the best title that has ever happened.
I'm so upset with myself. It's a fucking tragedy. What am I doing?
I'm going to call your brother, and your brother's going to tell you. Your brother's going to tell you what a terrible person you are for making
how
light.
How does that phone call go? Hey, Rashad, it's James. Long time no talk, maybe since the wedding. Anyway, so there's this quarterback. His name is Kirk Cousins, right? So K-I-O-K. That's important.
Dusty is spinning in his grave right now. Wait. Bad, Arif. Bad. I'm not changing it. And I'm not disappointed. I'm just going to move on and scroll so that I can't see the title when we do the show. That is my solution to the problem.
Nah, if you think that'll work.
Frickin' better. Because if I scroll and look at it, I will continue to laugh.
Possibility, because from what I've seen from him, it's been very good. I don't think that's the most likely scenario, but I think that it's not closed off in terms of his potential.
You son of a bitch.
What? I answered the question. What's wrong? What's the issue?
I muted myself. I managed not to crack. But immediately after I finished that question, I
don't understand. You asked me about a Fadi. I answered.
This is at 8139. Okay. Just same shit as always.
So we have a few questions in the regular part of the mailbag, some non-best and worst player related. Judd Zolgad's hoodie writes us and asks, and since this actually works out great, since we actually have like a 3-man pod this week, we can argue amongst ourselves about this. If all of you were left on an island, which guy is eaten first and why?
I tweeted out that I'm pretty confident I could use Arif's bones to pick my teeth.
But only if you caught him.
First, I am probably one of the more difficult of the three of us to catch. Second, I am like the least useful to catch. I'm so tiny.
I bet if Arif and I teamed up on Dusty, it would work. Like, I'm fairly confident I could figure something out for Arif, but it wouldn't be worth it. But I have a feeling Dusty might have a little bit more meat on him. So Arif and I combined could take Dusty.
Well, the elephant in the room, James, is that you have much more meat.
Of course I do, but I have deceptive speed, and I'm the only one of the three of us.
Deceptive what?
I'm the only one of the three of us that has dad strength.
Dad strength.
That's absolutely true. I agree with James on both counts. I thought about this all day today. Definitely the most worrisome situation for me is if the two of you gang up on me. Because I am confident that Arif cannot take me in a fight and that I can outrun James. But the two of you together, especially given dad strength, which is a real thing.
Dad strength is a thing.
I mean, you're the one tossing around a 2-year-old. Every day.
I got a kettlebell that that tackles me every day.
Exactly. It like wiggles and it's like weirdly proportioned and stuff. Like I just go to the gym a couple times a week and like all my weights are stationary and don't cry. I
got that 3 hours of sleep, nothing left to lose shake to me. Like
exactly.
You don't want to fuck with that.
I don't know though. I think. If
I think
nobody
of the three of us, I'm also the best at forming alliances. Probably.
I suspect that my butchery technique is better than either of yours. Like when it came to
that's
field
that's a
dressing,
skill we're gonna value.
Yeah, we're not interested in how it's being cooked afterwards. Like we don't need a sirloin cut of anything here.
well, no, I'm just saying that I would do the most efficient job, like cleaning the bones or whatever. Look, I need secondary bonuses in order to convince one of you to gang up with me and not the other.
Dusty's going to talk to a reef.
Gains are only useful in a situation where the person that you're cleaning would necessarily be similar to another person that would be cleaned, like you. So only if the island had someone who had your basic build, where your butchery skills be a useful tiebreaker. Because no matter what happens, no matter how inefficient James and I are, right, we're still going to get more meat out of you than you at your peak are going to get out of me.
Out of you, yes, that is accurate.
So that efficiency doesn't matter.
Dusty's big selling point is going to be something along the lines of, yeah, but after we kill him and after we kill James and take off his knees and everything, I can make a nice marrow stew afterwards too.
Exactly. I am very enthusiastic about using every part of my producer. Leave nothing wasted.
That makes me the kingmaker. I have to choose between the two of you in terms of my alliances.
Well, and I think that's the unfortunate reality is that this is going to require an alliance between two people because we individually have such I guess divergent natural strengths. I guess except for me, I'm slower than James and stronger than Arif. But I am neither the fastest nor the strongest.
It's going to end very poorly for one of us.
Well, I think for all of us, I mean, so we eat Arif, and then 3 hours later, we're hungry again.
Oh my god!
Did you really just go there?
That's such a dumb joke.
Because you're skinny and small.
Yeah, okay.
It has nothing to do with your Asian descent. Absolutely,
exactly.
Nothing at all to do with it.
Nothing at all to do with that. It isn't
terrible human being.
I mean, and realistically, no matter who is eaten first, the other two will be found with knives in the other person's body, either with your hands around each other's necks or stabbing the other person to death until you both die. No one, if we start eating each other, no one gets out alive.
Right, and no one wins. But the question was who is first.
Who's first?
Dusty and I are going to be found, and the guy's going to be like, "Oh, what happened?" It's we couldn't handle the metrics anymore. We couldn't handle the sabermetrics anymore. It got too much.
If there's other food on the island, if there's things that I can eat in trees, then I like my chances a lot better because I suspect I'm a stronger climber than either one of you.
Oh please! Climbing coconut trees is in my blood.
No.
Oh, that's racist.
I can't make the joke, but you can.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Fair.
You can't use that term. Only Arif
can. All right.
Also, I've literally climbed coconut trees. How? That's obviously I have an advantage.
Obviously.